This is episode number 22 of the Legate podcast with myself, Tom Wickstead.
Myself, Andy Grant.
And can I just say first off that I fucking love doing these because we have such a diverse range of different people on all the time. And obviously we're joined by Steve Saunders, and Steve is a crisis and hostage negotiator. You were on my podcast a little over a year ago, actually. I think it was about an hour and 15 minutes that we spoke for. Mm-hmm. And it was a really, really interesting conversation. I think we talked about everything from ransom for hostage. Is that the right phrase?
Kidnap for ransom.
Kidnap for ransom. Yeah. We talked about commercial hostages and assets like piracy and that sort of thing. Yeah. We talked about terrorism. And we talked about your background as well.
Yeah.
Which is, I presume you just don't fall into something like this. So would you be so kind as to sort of just give us a little bit of an introduction, maybe like, because you were in the police for a long time, a little bit about your background, I think might help sort of set the mark off.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a great privilege to be with you again, Tom, and really nice to meet you, Andy. And thank you for this opportunity to share some thoughts and about my experiences, etc. So
yeah, no worries.
I'll start by saying what I currently do. I left the police 3 years ago, and I went into, which was a natural progression, into the private security arena as a close protection officer and doing some consultancy work as well. But I landed up on a long-term, as it's transpired to be, assignment. Looking after what they could describe as a ultra high net worth client, the estate and the family, which is in a confidential location in London. So that's about as much as I can say about that.
I feel like I'm speaking to James Bond.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Because if I say any more, I'm going to have to kill you both.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing now, and that's working well for me. However, my passion has always been crisis and hostage negotiation, which was a specialised skill which I gained whilst serving with West Mercia Police. I'll talk a little bit about how you become a hostage and crisis negotiator if you want me to.
Yeah.
So each police force has a small cadre of hostage and crisis negotiators. Now, in order to become a hostage and crisis negotiator, you at the moment have to be a rank of sergeant or above. Now, although there is some debate about whether that should be the case, because people who have a lower rank as constable very often display great core skills that would make them incredibly good hostage negotiators. But it is what it is at the moment, and although they were debating whether or not that would change. So when I went forward for selection, it is quite an arduous selection process. They're looking for a person with good communication skills and ability. They're looking for people who can show empathy and have the ability to build rapport with people, and or have got the building blocks of those and can be developed further to become an effective negotiator. So it's sort of a selection process, an assessment day, an interview, and then it's like you're in or you're not in. You know, there's quite a high failure rate at achieving the selection process. Once you're assumed into the position with your respective police force, there's a really good training program. Initially, you go on a regional course. I did mine in Kent. And I was very fortunate to have the legendary Rob Kenneth. He was course instructor for the regional course, and he's globally known in the negotiation world. He's subsequently left the police. He headed up the Met's hostage and crisis negotiation unit for a long time. I think he's in Qatar with the Qatar police doing stuff now, and has been for a number of years. Massively experienced, OBE or MBE as well for his service to hostage and crisis negotiation. So I was very lucky to be on the course run by him. It was a week long, pretty intense, but massively rewarding. And that was that's the first step in the process. So you need to have a regional qualification, which then allows you to work regionally with neighbouring police forces, to any deployments.
Does each police force have its own dedicated hostage negotiator? Yeah.
Yeah. So each police force has it's a cadre of negotiators, qualified negotiators, and there will always be on call a minimum of 2 negotiators for any particular jobs that would come in that would require a negotiator. So there's always on call. So when I was doing it, it was probably every 6 or 7 weeks. I'd be on call for a week from 8 a.m. Monday morning to 8 a.m. the following Monday morning, and that was above and beyond the day job in the police. So I finished as an inspector, temporary inspector. I was qualified inspector, and obviously with the cutbacks and everything, it was hard to get a substantive position as inspector, but I ended up being a response inspector for quite a long period. I'd been a sergeant for 9 years prior to that. So you have your day job, but you could get a call, a job had come in that required a negotiator intervention, and we drop what you did to go and deploy to that. So that's how it works. I was just going to go on to say that the second step is a national qualification, which is nationally recognised. Again, I was fortunate to have Rob Kenneth as the chief instructor on that course. That was 2 weeks, incredibly intense, pass or fail, like days that didn't end, absolutely incredible scenarios where hostage negotiators from around the country would come and be role actors. So it's as realistic as it could possibly get. And passing that course probably was the best course, undoubtedly the best course I've ever done, not only professionally but personally, because the skills you pick up, the enhanced communication, that knowledge, and there are lessons for life in there. And interestingly enough, it's an internationally acclaimed course as well. So there was always whenever they run it, there's always international delegates on that. So we had the Australian Federal Police there, San Diego Police Department, and normally, although on not this course, they usually have Special Forces representative and the Secret Service as well. So you can see how acclaimed the course is, and it's the equivalent of the FBI's course. They run one in Quantico in Virginia, and they're on the same par. So it's top quality. So when people talk about hostage and crisis negotiators in the police in the UK, you've got really good stock, really good, really well qualified, and very well trained. So
can I just sorry, what sort of scenarios are they? Because when we last spoke, it seems like the police obviously don't get involved in any sort of terror related that's cross border. So if I was a British hostage, or the famous American James Foley, they don't tend to get involved in any of those cross border. It tends to be, this is just from what I remember anyway. Is it scenarios I don't know, I'm about to commit suicide on the top of a motorway bridge? Is that generally
Yeah, the reality is the bread and butter of crisis and hostage negotiation is there's a massive percentage of crisis response. So whilst there might be Gucci hostage calling out somebody who's barricaded themselves into a house, the stereotypical scenario of a drunken husband coming home and being abusive, and he's threatening wife or family, and a barricade situation, or a firearm situation where somebody needs to be, instructed how to come out to present themselves to firearms officers. The reality is the majority are dealing with persons in crisis, and possibly, that's incredibly the most rewarding aspect, because it's about suicide intervention. It's about, locating a high-risk missing person who's left a note saying, I'm going to end it all. I've taken pills, and they're driving around their car. And a lot of that work was done via telephone. You have a telephone link in, so you'd be called in so in a scenario like that, say it was somebody who was a missing person, had gone drive around in a car. It's about establishing yourself at a local police station, setting up comms, recording equipment, so everything that's said is captured. And it's about trying to make that contact. And I had, thankfully, lots of successes in eventually talking people around, but it's a real, maybe sending a text, maybe them hanging up, but remaining persistent. And always in any sort of interaction, there's three golden principles for hostage and crisis negotiation. Is your three intentions are save life, buy time, and gather intelligence. So everything you're saying and working on, you've got possibility to, hear in the background, a location, are they close to a railway, a busy roadway, or is it incredibly quiet? So there's lots of things like that. Those three things. So just guide me back to the original question.
No, yeah. So it was just like from when we spoke last time, it was a case of the police. Yeah. If you work in the police and you're in a hostage negotiator, it tends to be not as I suppose high profile isn't the right word, but you don't get involved in any, for example, like the James Foley incident where you're then having to negotiate like cross-border with, with ISIS or with Al Qaeda. Okay. It tends to be.
Yeah. So you've got, say, like, let's say domestically, you're going to have anything. So say an incident occurs, it could be a guy who's they believe has discharged a weapon in his back garden, and as simple as that, which has happened. And obviously the first response is a police armed response, and they put a containment on, so if the threat was to leave, they could deal with the threat. There's a silver commander who's managing the tactics of how this incident's dealt with. So they'll have a dynamic entry team, like in my police force it was the task force, who could do dynamic entry, so an armed dynamic entry if required. But before they use any measure of force, they have to ensure that through human rights and through common sense, that negotiation is exhausted before they take any other tactical option. So that we were a tool in the toolbox. So domestically, you'd be talking things like, let's say firearms incidents, murder suspect talking out of a hotel, which I've done.
Really?
Yeah.
This podcast is going to last for hours, so I've got a million questions already.
The guy is going to jump off the bridge 27 hours, which I've done.
27 hours?
Yeah, I did get a break and went home, had some sleep, came back, woke up and texted saying he's still on the bridge. He was on the bridge for 27 hours. I'll talk more about that. Barricade situation, there's a whole range of domestic things that a negotiator could be utilised for. Anything whereby to prevent the use of force or to exhaust before the use of force is the ultimate final option. So you've got, whilst you're doing your negotiation, there's a tactical advisor and silver commander who are planning, if negotiations don't fail, we've got this plan in place. So it's like you're a tool in a toolbox, but very often we're the most successful tool in that toolbox because you get pressures from commanders who want a quick resolve, but you can't have a quick resolve sometime in these things, because there's disruption to the motorway, because there's a guy on the bridge, but it's about you really need to invest this time and save this person's life. On the international scene, where it's a British national who's, let's say, taken by ISIS for want of a better organisation, there's an international cadre. So if that British national was from Birmingham, initially the crime would be sort of reported from a West Midlands police or West Mercia police perspective, wherever it was. But every police hostage and crisis negotiation unit has a senior officer who's internationally qualified. Now they go out to the country where the person's been held captive, and they are in a consultancy and advisory capacity to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and that's how it works. But interestingly enough, when you talk about, so obviously we don't negotiate with terrorists in this country. That's not the case for other countries. And this is where, we touched on preceding this interview, this is where kidnap, ransom, consultancy as a business, some of the big security companies who've got crisis response, is where they come in, because it's a different objective. It's about securing the release of the asset or the hostage for a ransom.
And they're willing to pay that.
Willing to pay it. And a lot of that.
So the terrorists will know that if they, for example, get a British guy who's really wealthy in the middle of Qatar or something, they'll already know that the British government won't be interested in negotiation.
I mean, that's the reason why, whether it's been criticised or not, I'm sure it has. There's arguments for both sides. The British government have always stood really fast on that. We know that. We don't negotiate with terrorists because of the reality that, as we were talking about on another subject matter earlier, you give in, then you you're opening the floodgates.
Do you think that's the right stance?
Probably harshly, you'd have to say yes, because but you couldn't argue that to the wife of a loved one who's just been beheaded, on YouTube. So it is a tough.
I think it's a similar. I feel the same when you talk about Afghanistan and Iraq. Whether it was a just war, whether we should have been there, and you can argue both sides. But if you're having that argument with someone who's lost someone out there, they want to believe that they were there for a good reason, even if you think it's not. It's really tough.
It is. It's tough when you're dealing with that raw emotion, because you're almost unqualified to say anything, can't you, in the face of that.
Did when you were in the Royal Marines, did they mention to you about anything about this is what happens if you get captured? This is what you do.
Yeah. We do like very basic training in the sense if you get captured. I remember the day actually having this brief, and they said, if you get captured, these are the likely things that will happen to you. One of them that I remember was a lot of the time they will rape you. That's like a standard thing.
Jesus.
And they said, if you are raped, a lot of the time a man will gain an erection if he's being raped, like a certain percent, and then a certain percent of those men who get an erection can actually come. And you've got that in your head where you're thinking, I'm getting raped, what does this, and then you end up,
Jesus Christ,
you end up, and it's out, and then it's like what information you can give to them. So back when I was doing it was a traffic light. This was 10 years ago now, but there was a traffic light system. So you had, you could tell them certain things, and then you could go into information, but then you'd build it up so it sounded like it was important, but actually it was something that you could find on the internet if you googled it enough. That kind of thing. So it was it was all 10 years. It might have changed because these things change a lot, don't they?
Yeah, I think they do, but
it was really interesting. And actually, when we were out in Afghanistan, I always remember this as well. We were on a patrol, and we had our standard SOPs, our standard operating procedures. And this one particular morning, the boss said, "Lads, just keep a bit closer than we normally would." We've had intelligence last night that a Saudi Arabian businessman has put $1 million on a British soldier's head to get captured. So just keep the gaps a bit smaller. So you're suddenly worrying about being shot at and being blown up, and then suddenly some bright sparks decided to put £1 million bounty on your head, and you're looking around thinking, "Fuck me, is someone gonna throw a bin bag over my head?" So we do all those threats were there. Thankfully, I didn't experience any of them, but we were trained in if it did happen, and then we had the slight threat of it actually happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do they say about trying to escape? If you can, just run.
I can't remember all of it now, but I think you just got to play it as it today. If there's a chance to get away, I'm sure you'd take it. But I've got friends who are in special forces, and they've went through it obviously a lot more vigorously. And they get told exactly what you can and can't do and when to do it and all that. But just being in the Marines, it was just a basic kind of level of, this is what you do. Yeah, but one question I was going to ask them, when you spoke about your training, before I went to Afghanistan, we used to do exercises, and we'd have amputees come in who, they could be civilians who lost their life due to cancer or a car accident. And then they'd have all the blood on them and stuff, and then you'd be patrolling along, hear a big bang, and then you've got this amputee lying there. And it obviously you can't make it realistic in the sense of you actually getting shot at, But I remember thinking, like, fuck me, there's a guy with one leg. Like, it was as realistic as it could get, you know, when you...
Yeah.
And it was... I thought that was really beneficial.
Yeah.
You know, how beneficial was it for you? I mean, because again, I've got friends who are in special forces, and they've told me about scenarios and when you get taken hostage, and I always said to them, but did you know, though, it was going to end? Mm-hmm. And I think they do it so well that you kind of don't know, you forget that it is that. Was it the same for you?
Yeah, you got so absorbed in it. Absolutely.
Because it's easy, isn't it? Sorry, before you answer, it's easy to go, well, yeah, but you know that they can't kill you, or you know that it's not. But actually, you know, when you've been pushed for so long, or you sleep deprivation. Absolutely,
you're training way into the early hours of the morning and things like that. I think absolutely you lose yourself in you know. I think they do this course probably in one of the most realistic ways possible. You know, every scenario that I went into, I was totally absorbed in that. I think that's something that we talked about last time, Tom. It's about trying to lose yourself. It's trying to cut off everything else, and you're totally focused on...
Totally invested into it,
objective. And I think last time we talked about, I mentioned Eric Tolle and the book called The Power of Now.
Yeah.
And how that's... I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I think I've heard you talk about it.
Yeah.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, and it's... That's... I mean, this is... Don't quote me on this, and sorry, Eric, if I got this wrong.
This
is the way I interpret it, and this is really basic. Is that, you know, obviously you've got the past and you've got the future and you've got the present moment, and the past, you know, can be our mistakes or whatever else they are, or things that have happened, which we may be dwelling on in the present moment, and then on the other side is we've got the future, and you can have anxieties and. You know, you're always over there thinking about that. Both of those steal if you allow that and don't control it to the degree, it steals your present moment, because the reality is you only have the present moment. The past doesn't exist and the future doesn't exist yet. It's only the present moment, and it's like coming to it's coming to being, you know, like a real focus and allowing the present moment to be present, and in that way you're most present. So whatever you're attending to, that's the best state, in my opinion, you can be, and in particular in hostage and crisis negotiation. So that sort of principle, you sort of get drawn into scenarios, you lose yourself, and it's like, for you it's real, you're sweating, you know, it's you're under pressure, you have to remain calm. Something else I was going to say that was just flitted out of my head, but it was going to be brilliant.
No, when you talk about being calm, then there's something about, I think, your voice as well. I don't know whether you've just the way you just, it is quite a calming sort of.
Well, interestingly enough, this subject comes up. This is a little bit of an aside, but time and time again. So, in fact, only last night, I'm pleased to say it was a female, said to me. At work, she's like a girl who doesn't come on to our particular assignment very often, but occasionally does. And she said to me, she's not British, so she's from another country, and she said, "You've got a really lovely voice. You know, there's something about your voice." I mean, I've heard, which is great because I've got absolutely $1 million, but I don't think anything about it, but I have this said quite a lot, and it started to dawn on me as something when I was in the police, and I went out for we had a police night out, and some of the control room staff were there, some of the girls, and when they met, they went, "Oh, it's the voice."
No way.
I found out that when I was calling in, like, it's Sierra 3471 or whatever. Giving an update, they were like, "It's the voice." And like, so
I'd have that as my Instagram name, the voice.
So, there's got to be a way I can bottle this and sell it, whatever.
Monetize it,
yeah. So I think without being unconsciously aware, this is part of, I suppose, the power of communication, isn't it? If people will be calmed by a particular type of voice. It's almost like, we got non-verbal communication which is generating all the time. They say 75% of communication is non-verbal communication. So it's how you're sitting, what your posture is, what you're giving away, with your face. But it's so communication is such a holistic thing, isn't it? It's from the non-verbal communications, tone of voice. One of I think it's Chris Voss, who is a former FBI negotiator, and he's written a book called Never Split the Difference, which is really popular and worth a read, actually, if you're interested in the negotiation world.
What's it called?
It's called Never Split the Difference.
Never Split the Difference,
by Chris
right.
Voss, and he's got his own company. I think they're called Black Swan, and they do commercial sort of negotiation training to businesses and the like. And in fact, it's worth looking up on the internet if you're interested, because he does blogs and various things.
That thing on, and I done an NLP course.
Oh, okay.
So and that's when I learned about the 100%, the 75% non-verbal.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's something like 8% is actually the words that you say, or something,
absolutely.
isn't it?
There's so much you can read, and you're absolutely right. It's there's only a small percentage exactly what you say. There he is, Chris Voss, and there's the book.
Black Swan Limited and co-author of the book Never Split the Difference.
That's right. And he talks in that book about the late night sort of like radio love voice. I am Barry White, Steve Saunders, voice. And that's like part of the tactic. Maybe it's all part of having somebody, I suppose, listening to you, and maybe a person in crisis will find that soothing.
I find that fascinating. I learned a bit when I done that NLP course about when you're communicating for like the motivational speaking that I do, how important a pause is. A long pause. I think it's so dramatic, and thankfully I've managed to work it really well. And I think maybe when I first started doing the speaking, it would almost not be a rush, but you kind of want to tell a story where you learn to just slow it down a bit.
Absolutely.
Put the pauses in for dramatic effect. And there's a quote Bill Shankly, who was it? Well, it was about Bill Shankly. One of the players said he'd speak really low, so you're almost peering in. The players are almost leaning forward, just trying to grasp every word he said, because he's spoken such a low tone. Yeah. All these little things, way communicating, and you think it's what leaders do. It's fantastic.
No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
I think you mentioned that last time. The power of
the power of now.
Yeah, and sorry, the power of the silence as well.
Oh yeah.
And I think alongside mirroring, so like when you'd be.
Yeah, it's all NLP stuff that as well, isn't it?
The foundation, what we talked about of any negotiation, in fact, any communication, are active listening skills, the active listening skills, which you would have, I'm sure, looked at in NLP. And one of the active listening skills is effective silence or effective pause. So the purpose of active listening skills is basically to encourage the person you're speaking to continue speaking. So if you're using an effective pause of silence, you stop, and people don't like silences. They don't like, because it becomes uncomfortable, and it sort of springs them to say something,
prompts them to say something.
Yeah, so it's really powerful.
Mate, get the bit up if you can, please, Tom, on YouTube. I don't know whether the actual scene will be on it, but there's a bit, have you seen on The Wolf of Wall Street, when he goes into the new... Have you seen the film?
No, I must admit I haven't watched that.
I hope this YouTube... It's the bit, mate, where he goes into the new office after he's lost his job, and he does the sales pitch. If you type in Wolf of Wall Street, one penny sales pitch, and he does this thing. So the guy who's based on is a guy called... no, it's none of them. I'll have a look myself in a second, try and find it.
I can't think
what's the guy's name?
Jordan Belfort.
Jordan Belfort, yeah. So he's obviously a great public speaker, and he does this thing when... Yeah, that's it, the first... no, it might not be. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. So he does this thing on the phone, and he's showing everyone how to do it. And he's pitching to this guy on the phone saying, you need to buy this stock, and he talks and talks and talks to the point, and then he says... you'll have the power, whoever speaks next. So he kind of does his pitch, and then there's this silence, and whoever speaks first, he's like, got you.
I know exactly the bit you're on about.
Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly the bit.
It's exactly what you've just said. Then that active, and you kind of. So he does the pitch, and he's like, you need to buy this. It's a great business, loads of potential, can make millions and millions, and does all this. And the fella's like, and then he just doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
And then once the guy says, I guess, he's like, bingo.
It was
He's
that
got
sales
him.
pitch,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Was that it?
Yeah, it's brilliant, you know. And after watching that, I thought, God, how many times in life where, you know, you're speaking to someone, do it to where he's on the phone, Tom, if you skip it a bit. That's it, yeah, this bit.
This key to making money in a situation like this is to position yourself now before the settlement. Because by the time you read about it in the Wall Street Journal, it's already too late. And you wait. You wait. And whoever speaks first loses.
Sorry, I appreciate it.
It's quality, isn't it?
It's literally what you've just been saying.
Yeah.
Is that silence because they'll feel uncomfortable, so that you're trying to get them to talk
They want to
more?
fill the gap.
Yeah.
They want to, the natural thing is to fill the gap, isn't it? But if you're using it tactically, then you know it's a strategy that you're employing to get them to continue talking, because all the active listening skills, which we talked about, there's a mnemonic, more pies.
That's it, more pies. Yeah.
So it's minimal encourages, open questions, reflection or restating, that's MOR, emotional labelling, that's more, pies, paraphrasing, I statements, effective pauses or silences, and summary. So they're all those recognised active listening skills are the sort of tactics that sometimes you unconsciously do, you know. So like minimal encourages is probably what we're doing around the table right now. Like I'm speaking, you're nodding, you know, and you're encouraging me to continue talking. And the interesting thing is, because we had the counter to that was yesterday at work. We had a meeting with a service provider for where I work. Now, the service provider is a company, and their representative on our site is a guy who I've known for a long time, because he comes in on a contractual basis on pretty much a daily basis. And I get on very well with him. And when we've had previous meetings, because there's been a dispute over him or his company providing training on the product that they're supplying, and he's always tried to avoid the responsibility that his company has to take on a training package. Anyway, usually in meetings, because I know him and we get on, and I know he's under pressure sometimes, he looks at me. Here's the desk, but he looks at me and he starts talking to me. Now, ordinarily, I'll encourage him and I'll eye contact and I'll nod or whatever, smile. So it makes him feel comfortable around this table of possibly hostile people as well. But yesterday, it was like make or break. He had to provide the training. His boss was there, and it was like they were going to give him. We had a brief beforehand. It was like, look, you know, let's just see what they've got to say. Anyway, as soon as he got asked the question, he looked straight at me and he was talking to me, and I made the deliberate decision to avert my eyes, you know, because if not, so he was,
because you'd start nodding along with him.
Yeah, I would have, and I would have been encouraged, but he needed to answer the questions without any support, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like the counter.
It's like a false support you would have been giving him almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas I'd be like, our objective is you need to do this particular thing. So I'm not going to minimally encourage you to, or support you. So that's just an example of, you know, potentially how we work like that. Minimal encourage. Other minimal encourages could be, it could be the yeah, okay. It's anything that's going to keep the flow of communication and talk.
I've had it happen to me. I've been on the receiving end when I first started doing the motivational speaking. Obviously, all the money's in the corporate world, and I've done a talk for a bank, and my rate wasn't as much as it was now, but it was still a lot of money for me. And this guy got me on a conference call, and he was like, I kind of told them the story and stuff, and they were all really pleased and really excited. And at the end, there must have been about 3 or 4 people on this conference call, and the guy, it was only over the conference call, so I don't know what he looked like, but you could just, from his voice, I had this vision of him just kind of, you know, sitting back in his chair, and he's like swinging on it, and you know, and he was like, right, Andy, perfect, mate, let's book it in. And it was his language that he used, and it was kind of like, so how much are you going to charge me for this then? And I kind of just crumbled, you know, and I was just like, and he done that thing where, you know, you speak next, and I was like, and I just ended up selling myself so short, because it was the kind of, you know, him and 3 or 4 of his colleagues, and he was like, it wasn't kind of like, so what's your rate? It was like, how much are you going to charge me then for this? And this whole,
the way you went about
it, and I just completely like, is it okay if it's,
and you sort of like, is it okay if,
rather than this is me fee, you know, this is me if you want it,
you want me,
it was
absolutely.
Like, is that okay if you, and
it's interesting, isn't it?
It's how you can be on both ends,
absolutely. No, it's the whole thing's fascinating, isn't it? Communication, you know. But you know, I don't know if I mentioned it last time. This is a slight aside. So people are bad at listening. Well, not everybody, but listening is a skill, isn't it? You know, it's an art in itself. I know some people who are just terrible at listening. Won't mention it. Not you. What we were talking about earlier.
Oh, yeah.
And because they're so preoccupied with their own agenda, or they're formulating their response.
There's a saying, isn't there, or something? What's the line? It's you're not listening, you're just waiting to have your turn, or something.
It's something like that. Absolutely. So they're not. So whilst they're preparing their response, they're not listening to what you're saying. But the Chinese symbol for listen, which you could get up if you want.
Go on.
The Chinese symbol for listen is obviously, you know, it's a Chinese symbol. But interestingly enough, it pulls in, when you break it down, it talks about ear, eyes,
that one,
undivided attention.
Yeah.
So that is the symbol. So you're talking about ear. So you just not just listening. You've got the ear, but you're looking. So non-verbal communications, undivided attention, which is being present, heart, which is empathy. And you, I presume, there's various variations of it, is again about you being present. So that's a comprehensive snapshot of what you should be doing when you're listening.
What listening should be. Yeah.
You know, in your sort of, if say wherever you work now, but say if you move to somewhere else and you were looking to get a pay rise, how would you approach like the negotiations of that? Does it ever come into your mind that I've got all these skills in my toolbox?
Yeah, that's a question I was waiting for.
Do you know what?
And in the back of your mind, you know, I've got the upper hand here because I've been doing this for X amount of years. Here are these novices here who are going to tell me what.
It's like having a special power almost, isn't it? I'd be using it to pick up women and everything.
That's right. Yeah. Actually, a colleague of mine said you should do that. Yeah, like be a love doctor. But interestingly enough, you know, when it comes to something like that, just like, you know, you the example of selling yourself short. I know I'd probably fall immediately into the same thing, but you're absolutely right, because it's approaching it in the right way. That's of maximum benefit to yourself, you know, or not maximum benefit to yourself, as about you've got a value and your value's worth something, so it should be the right amount. But we do sell ourselves short, don't we? That's the thing. And very often, you know, finances is like it's
a taboo subject, isn't it?
So it is difficult. But so yeah, going forward, I think it will. But there was a time when it's a long story, but with my ex-partner or ex-wife, I should say, wanted to buy an Audi TT. This is going back many years, and I was like, you
waste
can't
the money.
afford this is like 2-seater, you know. Nobody. Well, it's like in the back, you like that, and I was like, it's a bad idea. No, I'm going to do it. Yeah, no, it's a bad idea. And I was like, I want to swear now. Sorry, but I was like, for fuck's sake, what's going? You know. And so the car was delivered, and I was like, this is a bad idea. There's no way she's going to maintain those payments. You know, that it's just like, but she wouldn't listen to reason. Within about 48 hours, something had gone wrong with the petrol injection, and it was failing. And I saw this as my opportunity to get rid of it. And so they came along, and a guy from Audi came to the house, looked at it. Yeah, I can't remember now. It was something. I think something had a shaving had gone away into the petrol pump and caused a problem. I said, "Oh, we're going to have to take the car back, and we're going to work on it and replace it." So I saw, and I managed to get my ecstasy sense. So I went to the Audi dealership with a plan of, I'm going to negotiate this. They're taking that car back. I don't want that car. I don't want that car because now I think it's a crap car. And I went in. There was the main sales guy, like the boss and the guy who sold the car. And I can't remember the details of it, but I played the blinder, and they got them to say, yes, well, here's your deposit back. We'll take, absolutely, you're right, Mr. Saunders. This isn't, this sort of the service that you expected a vehicle, brand new vehicle, to be, not fail, but it has. We've let you down. We hope this doesn't tarnish your image of Audi, because I told them never again will they go to Audi and all that sort of stuff. So much so that they were taking the car back, but in the meantime, they allowed, I think it was something like, another Audi, filled it up with petrol, said, you've got this now for, a week, use it as you want to, blah, 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 and just handed it back and then walked away from the deal. But that was probably one of the times within a financial situation that I'd gone with a plan, and I'd gone and I utilised it, and I felt incredibly confident when I was doing it as well. And I had an objective, and I knew I was going to achieve it. And it went really well.
I think it is difficult in your line of work, and although it's completely different to mine, in the sense of working for yourself, and you've got to you value what you do.
Yeah.
And obviously there's not a lot of people who do what you do, and you obviously are very good at it. There's a lot of motivational speakers, but again, no one's kind of got my story, and I do find that tricky when you kind of like, no, I know I'm good at what I do.
Yeah.
This is what I value my service at.
Yeah.
So it's having that kind of confidence and communicating it effectively to make other people see that as well.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And then when someone says the figure, you just go, I don't know, $5,000.
Yeah.
And then just silence.
Yeah. That's what I need to start doing. Yeah.
All right, 10. All right, 10. Yeah. Done. Deal's done.
Hey, that's happened in the past for me. I done a gig over in, I think I mentioned on the last podcast, it was over in Japan, it was, for an advert, and I'd not done any TV advert work. Yeah. And I said, well, this is my speaking fee, which I normally charge for the hour. And then I said, no, that's it. I didn't say the speaking fee. I said, I've got a fee, but it's only for speaking. I've never done anything like this.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't even know really what to quote for. And then he come back with a figure, and I was like, fucking hell, go on. I'll take that.
But interesting enough, and this is food for thought for me, because on the LinkedIn network, I've been talking to somebody in Denmark who's setting up their own business, and they're looking into having consultants on board. And she asked me what my fee was, and I just had no response other than, I don't know, I'll look into it. And the most important thing is we can sort of help each other. Do you know what I mean? But
totally,
you're absolutely right. It's about valuing what you're doing and understanding where you should be pitching and looking after yourself in that regard, I think. So that's food for thought for me.
It's a bit like when I remember when we spoke last time, when if there's a commercial rants, like we did speak about this. So back in, was it 2012, 2013, when piracy was massive around Horn of Africa, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And these pirates would, so obviously nick a boat, wouldn't they? Whether it's Maersk or whoever, big cargo company, and obviously demand some ridiculous sum of money to get it, like $400 million or something. And then it's a case of the company's willing to pay, but it's trying to lower that 400 million and sort of up to a figure that so they'll start at 400 million, but then slowly whoever's negotiating got to work that figure down into a reasonable sum.
You're absolutely right. They this is something that when I went on a kidnap for ransom consultancy course with one of the companies, they were explaining, and it's exactly as you say. The company, so there'll be the pirates will go, we want 10 million for your oil tanker and the crew back. The victims in this, the company, let's just say, will then involve a consultancy company, one of the big ones, let's say, to a crisis response, to go and respond. They will then ask the company to elect a team, and that team are going to be responsible through guidance of the consultants to come up with certain things, and one of them is, what's your target settlement figure? So that might be because there's going to be an insurance payer, so they'll go, we're happy to pay £250,000 or $1 million, and then the game then is protracted period of negotiations with the pirates, reducing their expectations down until they get to the point where, bingo, we've got our target. This is what we're happy to release. This is what we're happy to do, and that's the game they sort of play.
Would that happen though? Where, for example, if I'm the boss of the ship,
yeah,
and I say, right, mate, come in. I'm happy to pay 250,000.
I am the captain now.
It's great, Phil. So I come in, I say, Steve, right, like this, get your team in, and then you get them. I'm happy to pay 250,000. I get them down from 10 million to 250,000, and you get them down. You are that good at your job. You get them down within an hour.
Yeah.
Could then the boss ever turn around and say, "Fucking hell, that was easy. It only took you an hour to get them down. Get them down to another 100,000?" Or is it kind of, you've got that trust there? It's got to be.
Yeah, it's that trust, because they set, it's almost like a focus group. I can't remember the exact terminology they use for it, but it's like it'd be key significant people within that organisation who would be set up as this focus group, and the settlement figure is what they agree.
And that won't change.
They wouldn't change.
It's kind of like that story where a guy goes, I think it's a leak, isn't it, or something? And anyway, the guy's got this leak, and he calls in the plumber, and he says, "There's this leak. I can hear it dripping, wherever." And the plumber comes along, and he knocks on the wall, and puts his ear to it, and then he turns this pipe, one turn, and then the thing stops, and he says, like, £100. And the guy says, "You kidding? You knocked on a wall and turned a pipe, and you charging me £100?" So he changed the invoice, and he says, turning the pipe, £2, knowing where to turn, £98.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing, isn't it?
You've got experience.
Yeah.
It's like building a brick wall is very easy if you know how to build a brick wall.
That's right. Yeah. And something similar in the same vein is where somebody charges, it's £2 for the turning the pipe, and there's like £98 for my years spent in college, the experience I've got, the tools I've bought, so that it's
exactly,
like the bigger picture, isn't it? It's about what you've invested and what's your value.
Yeah.
What I think must be hard is, obviously, so that company mentioned before, Crisis.
So
is there a company that there's dedicated that?
So there's a couple of there's probably 4 big companies who are global security companies who've got crisis response teams who have probably the majority of the contracts with Lloyd's of London.
The insurers,
The insurers.
Because it must be so hard if, like with that big Somalian time, is that, right, these pirates want $10 million. We're willing to pay $1 million. They start negotiations, and whoever's negotiating with them go, I don't know how they do it, but whatever. Yeah, no, we're only willing to pay $1 million. And then they kill someone on the board. And then that whole shift now is like, Jesus, things have got real now. And then I just can't get my head around how you can still say, no, we're only willing to pay $1 million. I still have that, like...
I think the thing is with I think, with the... And I'm no expert, so believe me, I'm no expert on this, but with the Somalian pirates, it was very much a lucrative business for them. So, an oil tanker is a huge asset in itself, and then obviously there's always going to be crew on board, but it probably isn't in the best interests of the pirates to start killing people because they've got potentially then much stronger intervention, like military deployments and things like that. So it's the whole sort of commercial kidnap for ransom is a different ball game to, say, a domestic kidnap for ransom here. So things like stranger kidnap are very rare in this country. You get a lot of criminal on criminal, drug-related kidnaps and stuff. A lot of that doesn't get reported to the police, but where an incident does get reported to the police, there's a priority of obviously preserving life, which is the first thing, and that's the overriding priority. But then there's a secondary priority which would never override the first priority, and that is securing and preserving evidence and bringing an offender to justice. So where you've got a commercial thing, it's almost like a business transaction to a certain degree, and there isn't the emphasis on necessarily preserving evidence and bringing the offenders to justice. So these big companies, when they arrange their ransom drops, will get ex-special forces in from various private military companies, ex-special forces to go and do the drops, the money drops and things like that in Mogadishu and wherever else. And it is
just a business transaction, isn't it?
Business transaction, absolutely. Where obviously when the police are like involved in this, a domestic thing, whilst they, there's a very specific way they do things, and it'll come to there's persons trained to do drops and money drops, but there's also a lot of tactical and technical things that can be built in and around that.
It's fascinating as well. On the Somali pirates, a lot of friends of mine got into the close protection maritime security, and they used to tell me that. So the couple of points to make here. So the reason they would get security teams on board was the companies, the ship, the big vessels, it would obviously cost a lot of money to insure the vessels to go through certain parts of the sea. So firstly, they only get the guys on board in certain parts, because there's no point paying guys £300 a day when there's no pirates there. So
when they're in Southampton.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they'd only be there certain times, but then also the company would then weigh up to get through the dangerous part of the sea or the oceans, whatever it may be. We have to go this fast, and if we go this fast, it will burn more fuel.
Yeah.
So I know that will cost X amount, or we can go slower, which will make us more prone to attacks, but we'll have the security guys on board.
Yeah.
So they make that decision. They weigh up if they just want to the costing of it, whether it's cheaper to hire 5 guys on board, or whether to just go fast.
Speed it through.
And also, a lot of my friends who were working on those ships said, the whole Captain Phillips scenario very rarely happened, because even still now, and I've probably not had this conversation for about 5 or 6 years, but back then they said there's still such a huge proportion and percentage of ships that don't have no security on board. So what would happen is my friends would be standing on a ship and they'd see a Somalian, one of the ribs kind of coming up towards them, and they just kind of put a machine gun in the air.
Yeah.
The Somalians would see that there's a guy on there with a big gun, so they just think, fuck this, there'll be another one 10 miles down the road, and we'll just get that one. And it is just like it's a business thing. Okay, that one's not going to work, let's go for this one instead. And it was fascinating for me to kind of understand how the Somalians look at it, but understand actually how the ship's big bosses look at it, as well.
Absolutely. Costing, isn't it?
And it's like that's what brought me onto it. It just comes down to money.
It does.
You know what I mean? We're prepared to pay them this much.
Yeah, business transaction.
Do that. That's it.
And I think you could get piracy insurance, couldn't you, from Lloyd's to cover? I know you probably did, I'm not sure if you know or not, but I'm sure you could at the time I'm sure you can still now.
I mean,
you get insurance for anything, I suppose.
As long as you pay the price for the whatever it be, it'd be more than £250 a year.
We'll go for third party only.
That's just what as well just sounds so different as well. You're talking about the corporate world, the business world. It's in a way, for me, listening to it like that, although the stakes are so much higher financially, doing something domestically, the stakes are so much higher emotionally. I feel, which is harder. You know, it's like kind of, I don't know. Let's say a business said, right, I'm prepared to pay $500,000, and then they end up paying 700,000. It's like, oh well, you know, didn't quite get what we wanted. If that happens in the UK and someone dies, fuck me, it's a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean the you know, like I say, thankfully there isn't. I mean, unlike some places in the world, kidnap for ransom, stranger kidnap for ransom isn't you know, thankfully that common here. But not to give away obviously too much of police tactics, but there's if a kidnap occurs, kidnap for ransom, there's a process that unfolds, and that person so obviously the person who's taken is taken to a stronghold somewhere, and there's what we call a victim communicator. So there's a significant person who the criminals, the baddies, are going to be wanting to talk to. Now, in that scenario, what they do is they eliminate as many forms of communication. It comes down to one telephone. So you're controlling one telephone. That becomes what's called the red center. And all communications are between the victim communicator, who could be like the brother of the person taken, let's say. He's going to be the victim communicator, or the significant family member. And that person will be taken to... So bearing in mind that everything's done covertly, because usually it's like no police involvement or else. So everything is done covertly. So that might be taking the victim communicator to a safe and sterile environment covertly, where communication can take place. Now that could be a hotel room, it could be somewhere else, another safe place. In so that area then becomes known as the red center, and then there's a red center commander, a red center liaison. But the role of the hostage and crisis negotiator, who's kidnapped for ransom trained, he's like a coach. So
he's telling the brother what
he's instructing. So they've got a call coming in. Before the call comes in, it's practice. This is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to say. You're going to have to store. They want I don't know, £10,000. You're having, you know, building in delaying tactics, and then running alongside that, you've got what they call a green center, and the green center is an intelligence cell. So everything the intelligence cell is working on everything they can glean from intelligence in relation to trying to identify, you know, where the calls are coming from, where the stronghold could possibly be, all of those things. You've got a conduit of communication between the red center could be here, the green center could be at a police station. So there's a commander of the red, there's a commander of the green. So there's liaison officers between both. So they might be picking up all sorts of little bits of intel through the. It could be like, so who did your brother have? You know, has he got any feuds with? So they could be researching, you know, connections, associates.
I guess social media nowadays as well, isn't it? You know,
absolutely,
trawling through that.
Absolutely. And then you've then got a blue center, which is all the covert tactical capability, and that could be underground surveillance, it could be armed surveillance, it could be, you know, they're working on everything tactically. So in fact, so that if there was going to be a money drop, you know, you potentially have covert capacity and asset out there as well. So whilst they want to release the hostage, brilliant, which, you know, the objective, hopefully with the money drop, would be complete. That's the priority. But employing such measures, they can maximise as much evidence, a securing of evidence, and leading a trail to find the offender and bring that offender to justice. So it's what I will always say, and it's true, saving life is a priority. It doesn't matter how much money they have to pay. It's going to be paid. But police in the UK and other areas obviously will have that desire to bring the offender to justice,
course,
and that's just showing again the sort of like difference between the two worlds. The private commercial world and
that must be so hard if when you talked about the brother then negotiating with, like if my mum got kidnapped. Because obviously it's my mum.
Emotional distress,
How you couldn't just lose your rag and just suddenly, it must be so hard for them.
What's that film? It might actually be called The Negotiator, and it's that kind of thing. Is it Denzel Washington or someone?
Yeah, Denzel Washington and what's his name?
It's an old film, isn't it now?
But it's
really good. And they're talking about, and they're doing exactly what you're saying. They're talking to the woman, and for example, he might say, "Don't say the word no."
Yeah, that's right.
And then she says, "No," and he goes, "Don't say no," and then he starts shooting people and stuff. And it's like she's like, "Ah."
It's a really good film to watch. But yeah, he goes. He's a negotiator himself, but he's been set up, hasn't he? So he's been like,
that's it, yeah, he takes
trying to negotiate the negotiator, and he's going, "That's wrong. You never say no."
Yeah. And she starts flapping, screaming, and then the actual negotiator saying it's okay.
It must be hard.
It must be. Imagine if your family member and you've got someone who you've never met before saying, "Tell him that, it's going to be okay," and you're thinking. You'd want to kill a guy, wouldn't you, if he's got someone?
And I think that's one of the things when it's in the scenario where it's crime on crime, criminal on criminal, where the criminal has gone to the police. One of the I think most difficult aspects to manage is to prevent that person you're dealing with taking unilateral action. So they're finding out a certain amount of information, then they disregard your advice totally and emotionally go on a different tangent. That they have to remain disciplined to achieve the objective, but you've got people's unilateral action which can jeopardize everything.
Did you ever, sorry Steve, did you ever get involved in any way you're having to talk to, I'm sure you probably did, having to talk to someone and tell them what to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you give any examples or maybe
not specifically,
no.
but it is difficult because obviously it's different to negotiating a person in crisis. It's different to speaking to the offender who needs to come out of the house and present himself to the armed police, simply because you're dealing with another individual. It's almost like a third party, isn't it? And you're trying to influence that person to adhere to what you see to be the best way forward to reach the desired outcome, but managing their emotion, managing them taking unilateral action. It's a much more complex thing. It's a much more difficult way to negotiate, because you're trying to negotiate to a certain degree with the perpetrator.
Through someone
to do it through
through a puppet almost.
Through a proxy.
Yeah, exactly, a third party. I mean, there was times in the other scenarios using in either crisis situations or hostage crisis situations where you use a third party intermediary, and that could be, it may be deemed appropriate that somebody, this is not in terms of crisis intervention or suicide intervention, you would not bring a family member to try and tell him to see sense, because in that scenario it's proven that, so the guy who's standing on the bridge and his girlfriend's left him and he's devastated and he's going, "I'll only talk to my girlfriend," and she comes along and she arrives and he goes, "Watch this." You see, so they commit the act, you want to hurt the person who's hurt them, or they're
fucking, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, so what you do is you don't allow that to happen. So for instance, on the guy who was on the bridge for 27 hours
Jesus,
and it was cold, it was like winter time, he was in the back seat of his car, of his parents' car. He was a guy who was probably in his, I don't know, late 30s, and his marriage had broken down, his business was gone down the pan, and as a result of that, he had married with two daughters. I can't remember their ages now, but they were like, maybe 10, 12, something like that. And his parents were driving him back from an appointment, with I think a mental health nurse or something in a part of the country. I mentioned, okay, keep it anonymous. And as his parents were driving him back to his hometown, they came to a motorway bridge, a roundabout over a motorway, and on the one set of there's a set of traffic lights, and the lights went to red, and the car pulled up, and he obviously looked and thought, bridge, jumps out the car and goes onto the wrong side of the railings. So obviously they phone in, so his parents are in the car, and obviously they phone into the police. On the day that it happened, I'd just come back to work. I'd broken my wrist playing football for the police. Would you believe it or not? And I had an operation, and I was back on. It was my first day back, but I was on desk-bound duties. But when the call came in, obviously I'm a hostage and crisis negotiator. I said, right, get me in a car and let's get over there. And on the way, so I self-deployed. On the way, so there was already a police. So as you could imagine, motorway,
closed,
busy dual carriageway. So the initial first responders come and they close off the road. Meanwhile, CMPG, the Central Motorway Police Group, are closing off the motorway. And en route, I can hear the officers, the first responders saying, his parents are here. And I immediately over the radio said, take his parents just somewhere out of the way, and under no circumstances let them engage with him. And then I turned up. I spoke to them immediately just to get a little something, a little bit about his background. So they told me, marriage breakdown, family down the pan, got 2 kids. And then I approached, and at a distance, he's the wrong side, he's got jeans on, he's got a hoodie up, and I just try and engage in conversation. Now, one of the first things, introductions are massively important, as we know, and it's one of the things was, you don't say, I'm Sergeant such and such, it'd be sort of like the unwritten rule is you introduce, hi, I'm Steve, I work for the police, and look, I'm here to help you. And then just try and engage in conversation. That he was unresponsive, he just nothing, was giving nothing away, not saying anything.
So are you on the bridge at this time, or are you?
Yeah, so he's the wrong side of the bridge, and I'm stood on the roadway, not too close to him, because he was very paranoid. He kept on looking down, and presumably thinking someone's going to come and snatch him. And I could tell from the outset that this was going to be a protracted. This wasn't going to be a quick resolve. So what standard procedure is, there's always 2 negotiators on call. So another negotiator then was deployed from the north of the force area to come and join me. And when he arrived, I said, you need to speak to you have a negotiator coordinator, because this is my opinion, this is going to go on, because we're going to have other negotiators come in and all that sort of stuff. And so a long story short, he stayed on that bridge. I stayed there from something like midday till 10 o'clock at night. Bearing in mind the motorway being closed down now, so completely. There was traffic jams, there was diversions, it was a busy weekend, and then you're dealing with members of the public going, jump, you bastard. And all
really,
that.
yeah?
Oh, yeah. Like, people are so unforgiving, like disruption to their travel. Oh, man. And the stuff that was being shouted. There's only so much the
Jeremy Clarkson actually done a tweet. Did you see it last few days? No. He tweeted saying, thanks to the, he said, I appreciate there's been an accident on the
Hammersmith Road, it was.
What was it?
Yeah.
And he said, but surely it doesn't take this long. And then the police tweeted him saying, oh, we're sorry that, someone's died and we have to go and... So, I mean, they didn't say it like that, but they made him feel like...
And, it's interesting because around that time as well, the police, when I was in the police, this is going back probably something like 2013, my force had started using a lot of tweeting, and that's just jogged my memory now, because the police were responding, like some of the commanders were responding, because people were going, like, yeah, just get an inflatable like
A little bouncy castle.
fucking thing for him to just fall off, and it's like, you dumb fuck. Oh, sorry. It's like, yeah, thanks. And what one commander put, thanks to all the armchair
warriors,
experts,
commentators, yeah.
And but having said that about an inflatable thing, our main negotiator, the head of the cadre, he came, obviously every man and his dog came out, but he was then negotiating with his peers, saying, is there any tactics? Because they were actually at one stage looking at, is there something that you could, but there's nothing that you could get, inflate and expand. We could probably invent this and become very rich. Invent, expand so rapidly, because the thing is, every time when he did start speaking, he was looking down and going, who's that? He was paranoid that he was going to be pulled off the bridge, or someone was going to come and like miraculously sort of like inflate one of these things.
Because you see them on YouTube, don't you, where people just like grab them and all the.
There's a no grab. See, this is the other interesting thing. You're taught a no grab policy, because there's a huge danger. You grab and you go with them. You grab and you actually cause them. You see, and that's the massive grey area. Now, I remember when we did our training, they were showing us a clip from one of the big bridges in Scotland. I don't know if there's a huge bridge, and they've got video footage of police negotiating with a guy who's on the wrong side of the bridge, and they're talking away, and the police officer actually went to grab him. When you look at the video, it looks like he's pushed him off,
really,
from a distance, and and everything. The other thing is there's accountability, and so when you're negotiating, you're always wearing a digital recorder as well. So, in the event of someone dying, that's all seized and taken away. Independent police complaints commission will investigate the reason, because it's a death with police, or death through in police contact, so it's scrupulously investigated. So there's a health and safety issue trying to grab, and there's a potential that you cause it to happen by having a good intention. That said, it then would come down to, while they say you can't do it, doesn't mean why they say you shouldn't do it as part of policy. The reality is,
if
you
the
might
situation
make a judgment call, and you may decide to dynamically risk assess it, and you're going to take that risk. Then that's
on that note. It reminds me of a funny story when we were in Afghanistan, and you get kind of a brief, and you had a brief from the FACs, so the forward air controllers. You had briefs from the MFCs, which is the mortar fire controllers, and they'd give you the safety boundaries. So they'd say, right lads, when you are engaging with the Taliban and you need our support, we cannot fire a 500-pound bomb unless you are 200 metres away, for example. And then the mortar guy would say, guys, we cannot help you out unless you are 100 metres away. And then you have an artillery guy who'd say, we can't fire unless you're... So you get all these briefs, and then I just remember we were on a patrol, and it kicked off, and the fucking Taliban were about bloody 50 metres away or whatever. And it was like, fucking call in the mortars, and all that safety talk just went right out the window. There's bombs landing, just like fucking,
Absolutely.
And so, you can have these protocols, but sometimes it's just like, fucking do what needs to be done.
Common sense, isn't it, under the circumstances? No, that's very interesting.
I've seen a few on YouTube, though, and the one I was thinking of, there's someone on a balcony, and there's the hostage negotiator in front of them, and they've got into the apartment next door, and then just kind of reached over and grabbed them. So it's an I didn't know that, though. That doesn't no grabbing policy.
That's the national policy. But like I say, I think it all come down to.
And this guy was really paranoid then of anyone grabbing him.
Yeah, and what he did was, so he was on the bridge, and bearing in mind it was really cold, he just kept on sidestepping like that across the length of the bridge.
So is he standing, for all of this, or is he sitting down?
Standing all the time.
Standing all the time.
And it was cold as fuck, honestly. And he just had a hoodie on. He had no shirt under the hoodie. But what I did was, I started trying to use emotional hooks on him, and that was to latch into something that may resonate with him, and that was his children. So what I said, so at one stage he said to me, he looked down and went, "It's not high enough, is it?" And so you got to give them a reality check. Then you say, "Well, to be honest with you, no, it's not that high. So you may, if you decide to jump, you may kill yourself, but you might not. You might,
break your legs and
disable or be in a wheelchair or in a vegetative state. So yeah, it's not high enough. Reality check. And so the way I was thinking about it was, I started to think he initially had an intent, and as time went on, that intent waned, but I couldn't be sure about that. Then I was thinking, the longer it goes on, he's gonna just go, like, he'll get so cold,
he'll just slip.
He'll just fall.
That's the first thing. That's the first thing I thought when you said he was standing. I remember being in like a parade.
Yeah.
When you're standing on parade and it's cold and your legs haven't moved for a long time, and you get jolted and stuff, and you.
So what I did then was I started playing on his daughters, and I said, look, if you do this, and bearing in mind he wasn't giving me any response to this, so it's quite hard talking to somebody who's non-responsive, because you're not getting anything back, so you're only doing what you think you should be doing that might have some impact. So I said, like, imagine your daughter, let's say her name is Ella, she's 10 now. I said, well, think about, like, in 10 years time. I said, 10 years time, she's getting married to the love of her life, and what an incredibly happy, significant day for her. I said, but if you take your own life now, that day is going to be very, very happy. It's going to be a great day for her, but it's going to be tinged with a huge sadness, because the one person who should be walking her down the aisle is you, her dad. You should be there. Don't do this to your children. So I kept on, like, hammering away at things like that. So that's another tactic. It's an emotional hook, and it's future projection. So you try and bring them to a future time when something is potentially really good. Or
do you ever use that, but use it on the guilt side? So, for example, you could have said something along the lines of, imagine how she'll feel driving over this bridge in years to come.
Yeah, you could use that. Absolutely. Yeah. You can. That perfect. That would be. In fact, I didn't think of that. Probably could have resolved it a lot better. That one.
No, but is that okay to kind of almost guilt them into?
Yeah, absolutely. As long the one rule of thumb is in crisis and hostage negotiation. In particular, crisis negotiation is don't tell any lies. That's like, don't tell any lies, because if you do, the next time they're in crisis, they go, I don't fucking trust the word any of you guys say, because you fucking lied to me last time. And this is where it's different between that and kidnap for ransom, because in kidnap for ransom, you're lying. Firstly, there's no police here, but you are. So it's a deception to a certain degree.
What about calling the bluff? If you get to a point and
jump, you bastard.
Well, yeah, like no, but on a serious note, like, say if you've been there 27 hours and you're thinking this is, he's still unresponsive, maybe it's my sick dark humour, but like anything like, come on, man, come on, let's either go for a pint or you're gonna jump, like what? Yeah,
and when I just said jump, you bastard, I did mean that just as a humour. I take all crisis situations really seriously, but you'd never get away with that. Because,
really, no?
Yeah, so you're recorded. So say you said, let's go for a pint or just jump. Then he jumps. They'll go, thank you very much. Now you're under investigation, because we have to see what part you played in his decision-making process to go. So you have to be massively careful.
And what could I get done then for murder or manslaughter or something?
Not murder, but there's potential huge disciplinary, implications. Then
see, that'd be no good, isn't it? I'd be like, come on.
It's like, who was it? What's his name?
I'd be cracking jokes, not jokes, but I'd be kind of.
But
try and have that light-hearted approach. I think
you could do.
if it's freezing, I'd turned up. I'd be like, fucking hell, it's cold here, isn't it, mate? You know?
we used to joke because there was a time when we were on call, and the rules changed, but there was a time when we were on call that if you were at home and the control room phoned you and said, we need you to go to this incident, we need to go. Now you bear in mind, you got the silver commanders going, right, we're going to need a negotiator. But a lot of the times that situation resolved itself even before you ever got to I had the thing where I got out of the house, got into the car, I hadn't got down to the end of the street, and it's like, yeah, you can stand down. But at that point, until they changed the rules, you'd be able to claim a minimum of 4 hours double time for stepping out of your door, which is, obviously that's the financial side of it. But why was I saying that?
Something about being a long.
Oh yeah. So I used to joke sometimes saying, you get to a job, and this is a joke, obviously, but we used to say like, yeah, get to a job. Somebody, some guys, hold up, he's not coming down, and you just go like, yeah, I'm on double time. You just crack this out. I'll say you want like a family bucket of KFC. Just share it. But that's the dark. That's the dark. There's things that help you to. They're all coping mechanisms, aren't they?
So the two things I think on that is, does it come to, for example, in Liverpool, people take the piss all the time. Like humour is. I mean, I'm sure in every city, but Liverpool especially. Like me in the gym this morning. It was last week. I think I come second, and one of the lads was like, I was giving them shit. I said, you only just beat me. I've only got one leg. He turned around and said, you only get cramp in one fucking leg. That's why. It's just constantly taking the piss. So I think if in Liverpool this is just pure my looking at it, asking if would it be right or wrong. Would you have more success kind of a Scouse negotiator talking to someone from Liverpool than maybe someone from Birmingham or Newcastle or London, or is, I don't know, would you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd probably find, it would make a difference, and I suppose that's part of the reason why every police force has its own set of negotiators, and so obviously it's local officers who are deployed. I mean, you could have a local officer from London who's
I guess so. Yeah.
For I don't think it's an overriding principle, but I just probably it's not written down as such, but I'm sure it's an unconscious thing because.
Well, I guess that rapport that's missing. It's
exactly. You talk about Liverpool or whatever. The Liverpool FC or thing because that's what you. It's as simple as that. You're trying to build a rapport. You're trying to show empathy, which is massively important. You're trying to put yourselves in their shoes, and you're trying to build, and on the basis of that, build rapport. And where you build rapport, you can start to build trust. And where you start to build trust, you can then influence. And it's called. So obviously, we talked a little bit about active listening skills, which are the foundations for any form of communication. And then there's the thing it's described as the behavioural change staircase. So if you imagine a staircase like that, you've got under the bottom staircase is introductions, and then you've got empathy, then the next one rapport, trust, influence, and then behavioural change. Now in sort of like crisis and hostage negotiations, there's like the FBI many years ago, with the aid of psychologists, when hostage and crisis negotiation started to come into a formalised discipline, for want of a better word, they talk about there's a spectrum. There's two ends of this spectrum. One is what they call emotive, and the other one's instrumental. Now, a person who's instrumental is that they're goal orientated. So that would be like your typical bank robber or terrorist. He's got an objective. He's got a rational set of demands to achieve that objective. And so you're negotiating with a person who's rational, have got objectives, and then you're working with that. Down on the very other end is what they call emotive, and that's where people are in crisis. Now, that's somebody who has had some significant event which has caused them to put themselves on the bridge, and that could be, a number of reasons. It could be, like we said, it could be, a traumatic, experience. It could be a death of a loved one. It could be a partner leaving them, or whatever else it is. But because they're in that position there, they're in a very irrational state of mind, and they're driven by the emotion. And that's why active listening skills are really good, because it's trying to immerse yourself with them to the point that so with this guy on the bridge, for example, he was emotive. Obviously, initially he was going to take his life. That was what he wanted to do. But through trying to build rapport and trying to intervene and trying to help him to have a forward vision, you start to draw them back into a more rational way of thinking, no matter how small it is.
And then he starts asking questions. It's not high enough, is it?
Yeah, exactly. So you start drawing him back and back, because what you want to do is draw them back to a rational position where they can think, no, there is a better way, or there's an alternative, or it's not that hopeless. And it's quite a tricky but very rewarding achievement if you can draw them back. And some of the some of the people who are in that state of crisis, have got to the position where they feel totally hopeless. And some people perhaps, so they've had an event. So most of us, we go about our daily lives and we have roadmaps of how we cope with certain things and pressures and that. Very often when a person gets into that emotive state, it's because they're experiencing something that they've got no roadmap to deal with. And then if it's an offender for some reason, then everybody's got, generally a lot of people have got a support network of some degree, whether it's family or friends. But then if the offender's done something which is vulgar to their social network or their family network, then they've got all their support structure has gone as well. So they're in an incredibly vulnerable position. And talking about, going just back to what we talked about earlier about being present and the power of now and all of that, one of the most important things I found was when you're trying to negotiate or influence somebody is you've got to step out of any judgmental mentality. So no matter who you were dealing with or no matter what they'd done, you have to try and emotionally not allow that to influence how you are. Does that make sense? So you could. So
I think that'd be difficult though.
Yeah, it could be. So you could know before you get to speak to this guy that this guy's done, or girl.
Could be a paedophile or something.
Yeah, exactly. And so
then you would be jump you. So yeah, no, I can imagine that to be tough.
So you see, because in many respects, by being present as possible, you try and dissociate from the factors that would impede upon you saving life, because that's your objective. Despite if he doesn't deserve to live, you've still got a role and a function to try and achieve. So
So how did this end then? This 27.
So what happened was I got stood down about 10 o'clock that night, and I went back home. I went to bed, and I woke up thinking. When I woke up, before I went to bed, I thought it's either going to fall or he's going to come. He'll going to decide to come over. No way did I think when I woke up in the morning that he'd still be there. So I woke up and there's a text.
And did you struggle sleeping, or was you?
No. I had a shot of something to help. And so when I woke up in the morning, there's a text message from my boss saying, Can you come back? And he was. So I got back. I don't know, probably about 9 o'clock in the morning, and it was something like, I can't remember now hours wise. It was 27 hours. So it's something like 3:30 in the afternoon. He stepped back over, and obviously we've had on standby then ambulance, but also because of his mental health, related issues, we've been able to get some psychiatric support on standby as well. So we stepped over, and he got taken into, he got welcomed obviously and taken to the medical professionals to look after him and take him to hospital, and then I presume he probably went into a secure unit or was sectioned. But it transpired that one of the factors which caused him to come back over was, the emotional hooks that were played on along the way. So by all of us, not just by me, but but it just shows you sometimes the power of still tapping away, though you're getting no response, and still tapping away at things that eventually, every children are a very passionate thing. Obviously, as a father, I adore my son, so it's looking for the emotional chinks in their armour, for want of a better word, to bring them back to a sense of stability and rationality, whereby they think there's got to be another choice, or there are other choices, or I need to consider this. Fascinating.
Goodness me.
So 27 hours. Yeah.
A friend of mine once, he worked as a lifeguard in Southport, and he always used to say, it's the ones that just walk into the water, that just go straight, don't scream or shout about anything, that just go, in the middle of the night or whatever, and just keep walking and go straight into the water. They're the ones you need to worry about. It's the ones that
do it.
Yeah, it's the ones that suddenly start screaming and shouting about it. That
It's kind of cry for help.
Yeah,
absolutely. And sometimes there's a cry for help that goes wrong as well. Especially people like to, self-harm and stuff. Take it one step too far. But I had a girl. Luckily, I must admit, I had a good success rate. I didn't have. One or two of my colleagues.
Make sure I get your number anytime. I'll just be like, listen, mate, I'm feeling a bit down here. Come and have a chat to me.
A couple of my colleagues had things happen in front of them which impacted on them to a degree. But there's good occupational health support, there's good peer support within the negotiation cadre, and most of us have got hopefully are lucky enough to have some good support networks outside of that environment as well. But so one colleague of mine had a guy who was on a 5th story of a car park, and they were negotiating with him for ages, and then my colleague said he just hanging on to that and just went,
Jesus.
And there was a senior negotiator went, look away, so don't watch what happens next. Another guy had a guy who was threatening to take his life with a shotgun in a caravan in some rural location, who blew his head off, basically. He wasn't because obviously, as you can imagine, where the firearm incidents occur, you're not going to be within a dangerous range, so it's negotiation over telephone with a firearms containment.
But that feeling though, where you think you're getting somewhere with someone and they're holding on, and then
that's it. And he actually, described, when he was describing, he said this guy was overweight, and he said when he went, he looked, and he said it was surreal. His t-shirt come up, his fat belly was wobbling to side as he was going, and then he had to look away. But saying this, how surreal it was, got this guy just like.
That's mad, isn't it?
I had one girl who she's probably about 18, who had been some sort of troubled past and been in care, whatever. But she was on a bridge in the town I was working, over a dual carriageway, and it wasn't that high. Again, I mean, that motorway bridge where this guy was higher, but this was a dual carriageway bridge, and she was sat on the ledge, and there was a really good female PC who'd already been chatting to her. And so sometimes when you arrive as a negotiator, you might find that one of the first responders, a police constable, may have already built and established some rapport. So you have to be very careful how you work yourself into that scenario. You can, and that's a different ball game, and that's another skill and another thing we could talk about. Is how you take over that. Do you keep them there? All those sort of things. Anyway, long story short, with this girl, her boyfriend had dumped her. Okay, and as I say, she come from a troubled background. Now, rightly or wrongly, rightly on this occasion, when the first responders arrived, one of the police officers turned up in the transit van and parked it under the bridge. So basically, if she jumped, she was going to hit this transit van roof. So anyway, as we go on, I'm talking. I'm trying to make some headway with her and that. But then she took off. She had a ring given to her by her boyfriend, which I surmised afterwards. But she took this ring off, and she dropped the ring. Then there's some classic signs that people do before they do the act, and it's like that, puffing their cheeks and they build himself up. And she was like, oh, she's going, and she just went boom. So I was with this female pussy, and I just went, just look away, because I didn't know what was going to happen next. But she landed on top of the transit van roof and just injured her leg. Fine, survived. But had she hit her head on the side of the van and died, the police officer parked it there would have been investigated, and possibly they would have said, they would have said, well, she wouldn't have died. Potentially she's not going to have died, but she's hit her head on the side of the police van that shouldn't have been parked there. You see, so.
And did she mean to, do you think, or did she slip?
She didn't. When she dropped the ring, that was the first. When she dropped the ring, I thought, she's going. And then when she started doing the, and she went. So there's some classic stuff. We watched the video of a guy in London on a block of flats. Not a block of flats. He was in a hotel, and. They had some I think it was a motorway police or a traffic police officer had a really good camera footage of him, and this guy had been had some sort of mental breakdown, had booked himself into this hotel room, drank the minibar dry overnight, obviously decided he was going to kill himself, was on the balcony. Was it on the balcony? No, it was a window. He smashed the window. He's like, oh man, I don't know, 15 floors up. Started doing these risks on, on the windows, and they were saying like, quarter of a mile down the road, there was blood droplets on cars, that from the wind and that. And then you see him doing the old puffing of the cheeks and just lobs himself off. It's like really horrendous. So what the point I'm making is that there are some significant
telltale signs,
telltale signs, visible cues that something's going to happen, so.
Bloody hell. I know it's a bit somber. Have you ever watched, there was a Netflix documentary, I think it's called The Bridge? No.
I've not seen it.
San Francisco?
The Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah, I've not watched it, and I probably should actually.
It's a dark topic, but it's a filmmaker put a camera by the Golden Gate Bridge a bit away from it and filmed it for a year. And then they went, and then they somehow identified some of the people that jumped. One person actually survived. Most of them don't, with the speed they hit the water. And then they followed and then they went to interview their families as well. It's cracking. I mean, it's a really, obviously it's a horrible documentary, but it's a cracking documentary.
There's one in about that forest in Japan, isn't there?
Oh yeah,
that's a bad one where people go.
They commit suicide, and where that YouTuber got into a lot of hot water, didn't he? Because he went
to film it, didn't he?
Yeah, somebody who had just taken their own life. It's.
I'm sure it's called the bridge.
Do you know about that Golden Gate Bridge? The very few who've survived it, have been interviewed, have said as soon as they've jumped, they've regretted it.
Really?
Yeah.
That would be interesting to speak on. Obviously impossible, but I wonder how many people who've committed suicide maybe just before they die thinking, fuck, what have I done?
What have I done, yeah. Absolutely. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I think, because there's only a very slim percentage of people who've survived it, every one of them said they regretted it as soon as they did it. And there was a guy, when we used to have negotiator conferences every year, like regional, so West Mids, Warwickshire, West Mercia, Staffordshire Police would all convene on some nice venue somewhere, and we'd have some like, you know, training, and it's get to know each other. And then there used to be a guest speaker. Usually they'd get somebody pretty good, you know, from of relevance to negotiating. And one year they got this guy in, I can't remember his name now, but he'd written a book called Bounce, and he'd thrown himself off Dover, you know, the White Cliffs of Dover, off one of the peaks of it, and survived. And then he wrote this book called Bounce, which was, you know,
bouncing off the ground.
Did he hit
a sense of humour with it.
Did he hit the ground or the water?
Yeah. They hit the ground and survived.
Jesus.
There's a couple of motivational speakers I've not heard them, but I've spoke at venues, and the year before they've had these guests, and there's a couple of speakers there's a guy who's on a bridge,
Yeah.
and he's tried to kill himself, and some complete strangers managed to talk him down,
Yeah.
and then 10 years later they like found each other again,
Yeah.
and now they do presentations together.
Yeah, I've seen something as well recently on Facebook where there's a female cop had saved some young girl's life, and now she's like, you know, motivational speaking and helping people, you know, trying to help people in crisis. But, you know, places like, you know, they identify suicide hotspots, don't they? You know, it's mapped out, and the Severn Bridge, for instance, is in Bristol is one of the hotspots, and so I think in a lot of the hotspots they try to put some intervention. There's actually a phone line, if I'm not mistaken, to Samaritans down there.
Or close by the bridge.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah, I see that on some railway bridges as well,
Yeah.
or like written on. I can't remember where. I'm sure it was anyway, station near me, and it has on the, you know, on the like fencing.
Yeah.
If you need someone to talk to, like by, I think it was Crewe actually, near Crewe Station. Yeah.
The whole thing. I was speaking to a friend, and he's saying there's a cafe by it's near a military establishment, and he was saying there's a cafe there, and everyone in the cafe is now trained.
Oh, wow.
Obviously not to your level, but
Yeah.
because of the military and the post-traumatic stress disorder, when people come in,
Yeah.
people are kind of trained to look at these people a bit different, you know,
It's
and
interesting, yeah.
see that, you
That's
know.
really good, actually. You know, one of the things that, you know, hostage negotiator aside, one of the saddest things I always found was going to, because obviously when somebody took their own life, there was always a police response, because the police have to attend, the police have to look to see if there's any suspicious circumstances, you know, in case it's set up to be a suicide. It's not, so you're looking for, you know, forced entry and all those sort of things. That's primarily the reason why the police go, because it's potentially a crime scene initially, and that's the way it's got to be treated. But I used to find it really, really, really sad going to suicides, because I used to just think, you know, your life's it's become that hopeless that you've seen no other choice, no other way. And the saddest one I went to was an 18-year-old lad whose dad had found him. He was he'd come over from Northern Ireland. His dad was some sort of building contractor, and he used to get his son. So the family had split up years ago, and the mom had gone back to Northern Ireland, and the son was, you know, sort of lived several years in Northern Ireland, but used to come over occasionally. His dad had some work, and they were living in a shared accommodation sort of thing. A landlord rented this nice property in a rural location. So the son had a room while he was over for the X amount of weeks. The dad had his room. The landlord has the room. And so he'd been going to work with his dad every day. So his dad went to get him up for work, you know, on this particular morning. Opened the door, bed made, note on the bed: "I'm sorry, Dad, I'm down the garden." So he went straight down the garden like this, and then there was a dog went to the left, and he's hanging from a tree. And then he called the landlord, they cut him down, brought him back in, and put him on the settee. But that was so sad to, you know, a young lad like that had become that hopeless, and his poor dad then, you know, reading that note: "I'm down the garden, I'm sorry, Dad, I'm down the garden." So, but, and I suppose the point I'm making, it's a subject I'm sure close to your heart, ex-military, and the high percentage of, you know...
Yeah, I went to a funeral a couple of years ago with a friend who killed himself. I was in Afghanistan when he was 18, and obviously he's seeing things out there that he wasn't able to put to rest. And I went to his funeral and I spoke to his girlfriend, or his ex-girlfriend at the time, and she said he tried a couple of times. You know, it wasn't like a cry for help. He genuinely tried to, and then in the end he got successful. And it's. Yeah. I used to think it was selfish years ago, thinking killing yourself, and to a certain extent I still do, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah.
But then you don't know how hopeless you must feel in that situation, and that's the thing.
I think that's the thing. And I think you're right, because, you know, you do, you know, you think, how can you inflict the use that people
for example, on the dads.
Exactly. You're inflicting so much pain on people who have to then come to terms with what's happened and ask themselves what they did wrong. You know, was it the failure of a marriage? You know, all those things. You beat yourself up endlessly, wouldn't you? But you're absolutely right as well, which is the other side of the coin, which I look at, is you've got to that point of absolute hopelessness, you know, and
like you said before, nothing's rational anymore. You know,
there's no other option for you. So it's a huge thing, isn't it? Really, huge thing, very sad.
Is there any, not to kind of you to like back yourself, but just through your experience, is there any kind of situation where you'd always think, just give me a little bit of time, I could get them down? Or, you know, have you got that confidence, or have you got to kind of be a bit, you know, look, I can only do what I can do? Or
I think whether this is particular to other negotiators or not, I used to feel, and this may sound like I'm blowing my own trumpet, which I'm not, because I'm actually quite a humble guy, I suppose. Is that when I used to get a call, I used to be massively optimistic and confident, and I'd be accepting if I couldn't resolve the situation, but I think I had enough confidence in my own ability as a good communicator to do what I could, and that I had a really good chance. And I had lots of successes. And a lot, even text, like doing it all by text message. Yeah, as well.
What, negotiating by text?
Yeah, trying to get someone to tell me where they were, and
that's a tense text, that, isn't it? Imagine if you spelled something wrong or something.
Yeah.
Do I put a kiss at the end or not?
Yeah, that's right.
A little love heart emoji.
Yeah, that's right.
Jesus.
So I think, I don't know. I mean, maybe.
You know, speaking to you, I don't know whether you think this, but you remind me of my surgeon. We've had my surgeon on, and he kind of always, he's very confident in his ability, and he kind of always backed himself, to think that, you know what, if someone's turned up with both the legs blown off and missing an arm, if they're still breathing when I get them on my bed, they've got a good chance, and I think it's great to have that confidence in your own ability to think, he's got a fighting chance now that I'm here.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just ask you about close protection?
Yeah.
So is that just generally close protection? What I think is, like, I don't know, royal family, or people in certain people in the government, and then also like wealthy individuals, so wealthy families, that sort of thing. I think the Getty family, I think, sort of springs to mind. I don't know if, I think one of their sons.
Italian mafia.
No,
That's what I was thinking something.
I'm sure it was the Getty family. One of their sons got kidnapped. Kidnapped for right. Is that literally just protection of whoever? Or?
So close protection is will probably fall into a few categories. There's so with regards heads of state, monarchy, significant members of parliament, and diplomats like that, significant diplomats, are protected by the police close protection unit. So as you know, it'd be the Royal Diplomatic Protection would be looking after the Queen and the Prime Minister. So that's their remit. In the private security industry, there's close protection, there's hostile close protection, which is you're going out to work in as a Afghanistan or Iraq, and you're on contracts like a private military contractor, more or less. You'll be on close protection details to maybe, I don't know, CEOs of companies, which you would have seen, no doubt, lots of times. And then you've got executive close protection. So, and then you've got a whole gauntlet of other close protection probably portfolios within, say, domestically, but probably one of the most popular is what they call executive close protection. So that's where wealthy individuals deem themselves to be either Gucci enough to have close protection, or that there's a viable threat or risk, and then they decide they require executive close protection. And I suppose that's the category I'd fall into, and that's the difference. So in the executive close protection industry, it's, and I think they've moved away from it quite a bit, really, from the stereotypical muscle-bound, bald-headed sort of to people who are much more blended in, articulate, good communicators, have a little bit of can hold, can engage with the client on a decent level, and things like that. So I say that's pretty much, is that what you look?
Yeah.
That's sort of like
an overview.
the overview. But certainly in terms of anything monarchy or government related, it's police close protection. And
if it's private, so if it's for a wealthy individual, you obviously have to bound by the laws of the land, so you can't carry a gun, like you know.
Absolutely. So I was going to say that. So obviously, any private, anybody working in the private security industry in the UK cannot carry a firearm. It's only the police and military who'll be licensed and authorised to carry weapons. So obviously, diplomatic protection will be routinely will carry firearms. Obviously, the diplomatic protection, the Met who provide it for the Queen, and that they're all routinely armed. But outside of that scope, no.
What about Trump when he's over here? Will his guys have?
Yeah, well, they
surely Trump will say, listen, Lizzie, my boys are packing, okay.
They definitely will. They definitely will, and they'll be permitted for that in this country. There'll be something. There will have been something drawn up, or they plan and prepare for these things really well. I remember when we went to, I think it was in 2013. There's the G8 conference, and it was in Northern Ireland, and the police service in Northern Ireland had to plan meticulously for this event because it was significant, and they had to request mutual aid, it's called, from police forces in the UK. So I've always been public order trained, so I was a public order trained sergeant. So what they required was like a vast amount of public order trained officers to go over to Northern Ireland. We had to go on a specialist training course at an army base down in the south of the country, where the police service in Northern Ireland trainers came over and were basically teaching all the officers going from England over to Northern Ireland had to go through a 3-day training course, because their tactics are different. They've got rather than using transit vans, you're getting out of snatched Land Rovers. You're working with the water cannon, so they had a water cannon there. So how to work and operate and with the in and around the water cannon.
They're allowed water cannons, aren't they over there?
Over there, yeah,
but not here.
No,
yeah.
I think they bought one.
They bought loads, yeah, and then
they said we couldn't have them, and so
then lost millions on them or something.
To,
I remember that.
Some other country somewhere for a bargain discount price. But the reason why I mention that is because when we were some of our specialist firearms officers went over, and they had at the airport, I was watching, like they had all their armory boxed up, tagged. It was all a special process at the airport, obviously going into the cargo bit of the plane. So there's special permissions to carry firearms, but certainly nobody in the UK who isn't a warranted police officer, an authorised firearms officer, or military is not allowed to carry. And if they do, if they would, under any circumstances, then they face exactly the same retribution from the law that anybody would in possession of a firearm. It's illegal per se. So.
We when I was in Madrid last week for the Champions League, like bit of negotiation that went on. It was so funny.
Just remind me, Jamie Webster.
Yeah, this is it.
Oh,
yeah. So we had a guy on, Jamie Webster, a mate of mine, who plays all. It started off in playing Liverpool songs after the match, and it's gone bigger and bigger and bigger. And anyway, in Madrid for the Champions League final, he's playing in front of 50,000 people, like, you know, building everyone up for the match, the pre-match entertainment. It was fantastic. Anyway, there was a press box, like a kind of press scaffolding stand, and no one was kind of, it wasn't like a troublesome atmosphere, nothing like that, but everyone just in excitement trying to get a good spec had kind of climbed up onto this press box, whatever, like that was elevated up, and it just turned into all Liverpool fans. So it looked like, made a great spectacle. If anything, initially it was just like, oh bloody hell, Liverpool fans have overrun the press box, and no one was causing any trouble, nothing. And the concert continued, and Jamie Webster was on last, and for whatever reason they needed to get this press box cleared. So the kind of organizer of one of the organisers anyway said, guys, you know, we've had a great time, Webster's on next, we just need you down off this press box. But there's fucking 50,000 people there, everyone's pissed at this point, no one was moving, you know. Someone else gets on, guys, come on, please, you know, 10 minutes, we need you just down, give us 10 minutes and we'll get going again, we need you to get down. Again, no one moves again. Webster comes on, a 25-year-old lad from Croxteth around the corner. He just says it in his really thick Scouse accent, all right lads, listen, everyone fucking move, give us 10 minutes and they'll be sorted. Everyone just got off a bit. And it was just such a great moment to think, you know, the negotiating skills, and that's why I asked before about the rapport and the respect, because you know, absolutely. Sometimes if you're getting told to do something, it's like, fuck off, who are you?
You're absolutely right. No, that's a perfect example of it.
And I just love the fact that, you know, these you know, people in you know, in positions just had no say on it at all. Webster was standing there with his guitar. Listen lads, just give us 10 minutes, come on. And everyone just moved.
Do you want to really quickly do some questions?
Yeah, there's some crackers, so we've probably covered a lot of them actually, to be fair, and we normally do, but let's see. So yeah, what's the craziest demand you've ever been asked for? That's a good question, I think. It's probably not good for you, but that's from Sammy.
I don't know, probably a sex toy.
What?
Very joking.
Edit the bit out where he said he's joking.
I'm afraid there's nothing too crazy. It's usually food products like we
pizzas.
touched on. Pizzas, Kentucky Fried Chicken, bargain, family bucket.
Really?
Yeah.
Just
in terms of like what's, you know, I suppose it's not even bizarre, is it? It's like they want something to eat, but you know, like they milk it.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
And wedges, iron garlic.
And you
don't forget the barbecue sauce.
Yeah. and you do it all, like,
well,
you know.
That's a whole strategy again.
Right.
The whole concessions scenario.
If I'm getting you a McFlurry, I want something off you.
Yeah, but you've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
There's got to be some sort of concession in there. So you're talking at two massively different extremes. You could be say you had a hostage negotiation scenario where, let's say, terrorists had taken hostages in a shopping mall or something, and you're negotiating food into them. Or they're requesting for you, and so you've got a clear objective there. So that's where you'd be able to possibly build concessions. And you know, we're going to do this, or we do this for you, but you know, we want you to, you know, there's that injured person there. We really need to get that person's medical attention. So it's a trading off. Whereas with the guy on the roof pissed up or whatever, and he just wants a bargain bucket, well, just give him a bargain bucket. Obviously no alcohol, no drugs, stuff like that, things that would
no hookers.
No hookers, no, unfortunately.
Do you have we spoke a little bit about this, but do you have a special or different voice when negotiating?
No, I don't actually. This The Voice, which it keeps rearing it keeps coming back up, resurfacing. It must be a sign. It's just my natural voice. So maybe I could get in. Sexy. Maybe I could get into late night love radio.
again, it was kind of spoke a little bit about this, but how often in a week are you negotiating for hostages? In the sense when you, but in the UK, I guess.
In the UK, so yeah. So to put it into perspective, and without giving you statistics, I'll reiterate that the vast majority of hostage. So, in fact, it's probably better to call it crisis and hostage negotiations, because the vast majority, the bread and butter of the work of the police negotiators in the UK is crisis intervention, 100%. But there are, obviously, also there is a big percentage where we're utilised in other scenarios, such as the murder suspect whose car's outside the hotel and is in room 321, and we've got comms with that room, and you're talking him out, or any of those things.
I think people just don't. The people when I put out was we've got a hostage negotiator on. People, I think, got that Hollywood kind of.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Another question: what's the weirdest demand? That was a popular question.
Sex toys.
If someone tweeted, if Boris Johnson was the hostage, would you phone in sick this day?
Yeah, I would leave the country.
That is a good question.
How long does it usually take to get rapport, and what do you do if he's wise to your?
Good question. I don't think so. I think that would be the scenario in the film The Negotiator. If you happen to have to negotiate a negotiator, that would be difficult. Or somebody who's familiar with police tactics. What was the first part of that question? Sorry.
How long does it take to build rapport?
And that just really does depend on what sort of on what way you introduce yourself, and then there's no time. There's no. I think you get a good. When you're with people, you start to get an idea of how well you're starting to align with them, and how they're responding, and how engaging they are with you. So I don't think you can really put a definitive amount of time on that, because with the guy who was on the bridge for 27 hours, I honestly thought I was getting nowhere with him, but obviously I was.
Yeah.
And although I wasn't having two-way conversation with him, I was having some sort of impact on him. Whereas with somebody else, I could build up a rapport relatively quickly. And I think it's about being non-judgmental and just trying to ask potentially tease out the right questions. Why here? Why today? And trying to open them up, because it might be an anniversary of the death of a loved one, or whatever. Yeah.
Steve Price on Twitter said, "Any tips he has for me to persuade the missus to let me play out with the lads at the weekend?"
That's a good one. You're gonna have to make a concession there. I would say, promise to buy her a Louis Vuitton handbag, or a good fake at least.
Just for yourself, Lawrence Clark has asked, said he's really looking forward to this one, and he says, does he have any specific techniques for staying calm in a high pressure situation?
I think a lot of that comes down to your personality type, and possibly what you've been exposed to previously, and how you are in dealing under pressure. So I think the more experienced you are, the more confident you're in ability, it's going to be more conducive to remaining calm, because you may be coming on the back of several good results, so you've built a cognitive roadmap of where you're going with this, whereas maybe when you first do it, it's much more of a panic and
do you use anchor points? Do you talk about that in NLP?
No, I mean, I have read years ago. Read quite a bit on NLP, and I can't. Anchor points are things whereby you sort of giving yourself a reassurance to a time when you were very resourceful, and trying to tap back into that. So
they explained to me, you'd think of a really happy time, something you feel great, and for example, you'll pinch your finger.
Yeah, that's right. Dig your
and then anytime, and then anytime you're, I'm not a motivational speaker for nothing, mate. So anytime then you're feeling distressed, you might close your eyes and just pinch your finger again, give yourself that same feeling, and it takes you back to that time of I'm feeling good again.
There's definitely great benefit in that, and I've read that before. But I suppose to answer his question, it's is there any tactics to remain calm under pressure? I think it's, you know, confidence in your own ability, but that can only be built on experience and exposure. I think it's like all things. The more exposure you get to certain situations, the more the more capable you'll feel, and resourceful you'll feel.
I always feel when I'm doing motivational talks, people say, God, you know, you're standing on stage in front of 1,000 people or whatever. I always think what gives me confidence is I always think, and I suppose it's like this in anyone's field, I always think I know more than them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So if you're,
absolutely.
So no one can tell me more about what happened to me because it's my story.
And you're speaking from authenticity, and no one can. Once you're telling an authentic story based on your experience, then you're incredibly powerful, aren't you? You know.
It's a good question, actually.
Yeah, really good. Mate,
I remember because the focus for you being on my old podcast as such was from a business point of view.
That's right.
So how transferable skills that you've obviously got into the workplace. Yeah. So whether the classics negotiate, but any other skills like the communication, etc.
You know, earlier on I said there was something else about my background I hadn't told you about. Okay.
Oh no.
Now this may be like, you know, you're talking about transferable skills and you know where I've come from and that, but don't laugh, all right? Prior to joining the police, I was a Catholic priest.
Really?
Yeah. So
really?
I was ordained as a Catholic priest in 1994, and I left the priesthood in 1998. And then I did in the interim period, I was a personal trainer, and then wanted to join the police, went into the police. Now, talking about transferable skills, obviously, as you can imagine, I spent 8 years studying for the priesthood. So I went to seminary, St. Mary's Seminary, which is in, I don't know if either you guys are Catholic, so you understand the Catholic world a bit. And so I spent 8 years studying for the priesthood, and then I spent 5 years as a priest. And as you could imagine, as a priest, I was involved in significant times in people's lives from a spiritual perspective, from obviously baptisms to funerals to weddings to confessions to counselling. So maybe in some respect, how I've got to where I did within hostage and crisis and negotiating and everything, and maybe what's given me the aptitude
and the advantage,
and the advantage is because I've been, you know, I suppose I've had to be a good communicator within those.
You've been in so many different situations that I've got people at different varying emotional states.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
when you said priest, I was thinking, how was that beneficial? But actually, when you think about it,
well, when I was joining the police, because I always wanted to be. From when I was a kid, I wanted to be a police officer. I got sidetracked by religion, by God, working for God for a bit.
He's a difficult one to negotiate, though.
Yeah. But what happened was when I went for when I was being interviewed from for the police, they said you know, so obviously you used to be a priest, you know, and I said, I believe there's massive transferable skills between the two professions, because, and this is something that I used to live to as a police officer and encourage others to see as well, is that as a priest, you were involved in significant moments in people's lives. So it could be administering the last rites, comforting, you know, relatives of somebody who's just passed away, and then all the associated aftermath, you know, funeral arrangements, getting to know the family, blah blah blah, making sure their loved one is, you know, sent off well. So that's significant, massively significant point in people's lives. Death, weddings, massive significant occasion in anybody's life. Baptism. So I said all those. So you had the privilege of entering into people's lives at a significant time, and as a priest, you were a servant of a community. Well, in the police, conversely, or as a police officer, how does it transpose? Well, you're a servant of the community, and you are entering into people's lives in a unique way that the general public don't at times of crisis, and that's whether or not they've been a victim of crime, whether or not they're a perpetrator of crime, whether you're delivering a death message to a family. And how you act and how you are and how compassionate or fair kind, showing empathy, will make a lasting impression, because everybody remembers the significant moments, and how people have treated them will have a lasting impression. So it's so important to make sure that at those times you make the right impression, and that's something that that was like one of my principles of being a police officer, because general public don't enter into people's lives like this. And I used to say, some of the younger guys or younger in service guys who, you know, maybe didn't have as much life experience, just saying, you know, you're in a really privileged position, and you be, you know, a bastard, they're going to remember the police officers being a bastard, or uncaring, or not compassionate. Yeah. Whereas you can actually turn anything to gold if you want to, and smart enough. Does that make sense? So
yeah, totally.
Massive transferable skill.
That's crazy.
It's funny, because when you first said that, I was thinking, where's he going with? But actually, yeah.
And you know, this I've threatened to write a book, you know, but I don't know how to get around it. Anyway, the title I've already thought of. It's going to be From Saving Souls to Saving Ass.
It's a good one.
We were talking about this.
As far as I got with it.
I've got a good ghostwriter I'll put you on to.
Brilliant.
That's what I was just about to say. That because it was about a year ago you were going to start writing it, wasn't you? Yeah. But it was. I think we talked about it anyway. But like the whole structure, I think is very hard to get.
Yeah, I think it's where to start, where to go with it, what's relevant.
Like if we'll chat a bit more after it. Okay, there's a really good guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe this was so popular, you know, on social media. This is a really hard question, so you don't have to kind of do it. But someone said, like, if you have 30-second opportunity, no prior knowledge to like the kind of the victim, you know, what would you say? I guess that's so wide open, isn't it?
So would this be somebody in a negotiation? So would this be like a suicide intervention?
No, let me pick it then. I've got you just know me. I'm just in a bank. I've got a few hostages, and you know, I'm in a bank. You've got 30 seconds.
30 seconds. I'll get you out the back door. Give me half of the money.
Deal. Yeah. Another
Think about the consequences.
Again, everyone wants to know what the weirdest demands have been.
Sex toys.
It's a good question, actually. How does he prepare himself, and how does he switch off afterwards?
Good question. So I think how do you switch off afterwards is basically, like, I keep myself, you can't tell it, relatively physically fit.
Anyone's listening on without watching it, he's absolutely huge, this guy. Like a tank.
Seen those guns. So like I mean, so from like you know, since I was 18, I've pretty much trained every day doing something, and I was massively into distance running, and I love running. I find the most therapeutic form of anything. The most therapeutic thing I do is exercise, and I find no matter what's gone on, what I've had to deal with, or what stress I've had, I always find that training always puts me back into perspective. So that, for me personally, that's the key.
No, I totally relate with that. Yeah. Is it hard to not think of every conflict, even in your personal life, as a negotiation?
Do you know what?
Good question.
It is a good question.
Very good question.
It is a good question. I suppose the reality is this: we're all negotiators. So I don't to whatever degree, because in everyday life we're all negotiating on various times in various ways and I think we do it unconsciously. And I think if I've been in conflict with in a personal relationship, I don't think I've ever strategized deliberately over it. But I've probably just naturally dealt with it. It's come naturally, and I think with how I operate as a negotiator as well, it felt natural. So I wasn't trying to build a framework of, you know, I might have some idea where I want to go, and I might have some, you know, I can try that, but I used to let it go naturally, if that makes sense.
It's okay. I'm gonna grab your number then when I get myself a missus and then I have a domestic. I'll be ringing you, mate. What would you do in this situation?
Listen, I've got back at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Shit's in the fan.
Lipstick on the collar. Playing this one.
Shit. Another funny one said, can you ask him how Rangers can safely negotiate the quick release of Ryan Kent from Liverpool? This is urgent, mate. Mate, that was all just.
Was that just on Instagram?
That was just on Twitter.
Jesus.
So, mate, yeah, it's been without doubt the most popular kind of question one. And then these are from Instagram. Some of them might be repeated. Yeah, again, what's the most bizarre request? People want to know. What's the weirdest demand again? What's the worst thing you can say at your job? Well, we said that, haven't we? Like jump now.
Yeah, that would be anything that's going to cause you like some sort of trauma because you've witnessed a traumatic event. Yeah.
Again, people want to know what's been the funniest thing. Yeah, and the others we've kind of covered. Like, really, do you have any set questions, or the questions tailored to every hostage safety situation? Or again,
yeah, very very rarely there's would be set. You know, it's almost like us chatting here today. It's pretty much unscripted, isn't? Well, it is unscripted.
Yeah,
it's, we've flown and we've bounced around different things. I think that's the best mindset to have. With regards, but there are exceptions to that to a certain degree. So, for instance, again, if it was a demand, what we call an instrumental hostage situation where there's been various demands made, or you've got. So we used to have things like, so for instance, this guy who had to talk out of the house, who discharged a firearm in his garden and present himself safely to the firearms officers. Obviously, in order to achieve that, I had to give him an exit plan. So before I spoke to him, I had to clearly define what the exit plan was going to be. It's really basic, but they like to have these things written down, and it'd be something along the lines of. So when I spoke to this guy, I said something along the lines of, you may be aware that there's a lot of police activity in and around your street at the moment. Hi, I'm Steve from the police. But you may have noticed this. And I said, I say, what we're doing now, or what I need you to do is we need to evacuate all the properties in the street. Bit of a white lie, not a total lie. However, please be aware that there's firearms officers on a cordon all around your property. What I need you to do is to present yourself to the police officers in a safe way. So you're going to have to listen very carefully to my instructions. When we end this phone conversation, I want you to open the front door of your property. I want you to stand on the doorstep and have either hand, your arms down to your sides, splayed out with your palms of your hands facing forward, so that the firearms officers outside can see that you're going to present no threat to them. I want you to take one step forward at that point and then slowly do a 360-degree turnaround again for the firearms officer to ensure that you're not carrying anything that's going to hurt them, injure them, or hurt yourself, etc. Once you've done that, listen to the instructions of the firearms officers and follow them implicitly. Can you repeat to me what I just said? Yeah, I'm going to do this, or we might have to go over it again. And that's called an exit plan, and that's
when it's got to be detailed, like
taking them safely out. Yeah, and if there was a delivery of food to that scenario, there'd be a delivery plan, so that'd be set out as well. Because you can't be any surprise. So if there's a situation where there's guys on the inside with guns, they're threatening people, but we want some food delivery, you're going to have to say, okay, we're going to deliver this, but this is how it's going to happen. You'll see police officers with ballistic shields at the front of the food delivery. They're going to you have to spell it all out so there's no surprises and they're clear about what's going to happen.
What's in all the negotiations you've done? what's the kind of, I'm not asking for a specific moment, but what is the kind of most tense time of it? Is it, for example, when it's like a food delivery and there's gun weapons involved? Is it, you know, when it's what's the bit where you're like, this is fucking quite tense now?
I think so if there's a food delivery or a situation where there's a firearms involved, it's per se it's going to be, you know, it's a more tense scenario, and especially, but bearing in mind that as a negotiator you're pretty much out of the line of fire, so you're aware that other people may be pushing themselves into a potential area of danger.
It's tense at different situations and different times.
So I think there's different tensions. You know, you could say you could feel that somebody was going to, you know, jump, let's say, and you know, you might get a bad feeling about that, and then that may then become your tense time. That could be 10,000 times more worse than, you know, being behind you know, a wall that no bullet's going to penetrate. So I think it's sort of subjective or particular to each different scenario, I suppose, and again probably comes down to your own personal exposure to various fear factors as well.
On the demand thing as well, has there been anything that's not crazy, but you kind of like, mate, that's never going to happen? Like, you know, you're thinking in your head, like... So, yeah, I mean, you know, you could think of all probably the classic things like, you know, I want a plane to Cuba, and you know, why Cuba? But you can't say no. You go say, I can't make those decisions, but I'm going to pass that back to the, you know, so all the time you're buying for time, and then you've got to reduce expectation, you know, not got you a private jet full of hookers to Cuba. Well, what I have got here is a minibus going to bloody... With blacked out windows, that's what you can do. Going to Blackpool for the night.
Before we started this, and when I was at work today, I was just having a quick flick through, and I completely forgot about the huge was it the 80s with the Libyan Embassy crisis? Was it Libyan Embassy crisis?
In London?
Yeah.
It was the...
Iranian?
The Iranian Embassy, when the SAS sort of...
That was it.
Notoriety. Hey, and sorry, just before I interrupt you on that one. Where is that? We spoke about PTSD and suicide before. The guy who done the raid, his son was killed in Afghanistan, and then he later on committed suicide himself.
Really?
Yeah, because his son was killed in action, and he just couldn't live without his son, and he unfortunately killed himself.
Yeah, I know who you mean. I can't think of it.
It was the guy who was kind of one of the first through the windows in that famous footage.
Why can't I think of his name? In fact, funnily enough, because I was saying to Tom, I was working till 4:30 this morning, and whilst I was having like a bowl of cornflakes at 3:15, there was on TV. You know, there's always that mindless sort of middle of the night TV. There was SAS stories, and they were talking, and it was the Iranian Embassy Siege, and the guy you're talking about was being interviewed. I can't think of his name. If it comes,
I could find it there. 6 days.
Yeah, and you know the police officer, Trevor Locke, who was on duty that day. He's a lovely guy because I met him on the negotiators course. The National Negotiators course, they used to bring Trevor Locke in to speak about this particular, you know, this event, and he was like a really humble police officer who sort of like happy doing this, happy doing that. They went, "Oh, Trevor, do you want to be like? Do you want to stand outside an embassy and it's a great job. Just stand there all day, you know, and have coffee occasionally with them." And that sounds like a great job. Yeah. Oh, by the way, go down the firearm. You're gonna have to like crack off a few rounds with Smith and Wesson because you'd be carrying a Smith and Wesson. Yeah, all right. So he's like almost like the Dixon of Doc. No disrespect to him, but a really like nice, inoffensive sort of, not stereotypical as we got now, like specialist firearm officer. And he, on the day they raided, he was on duty, and they went. Yeah, it is Terry Locke or Trevor Locke? Terry
I'm sure it'll be on here, won't it?
It's Terry Locke. I'm sure it's Terry Locke. Yeah.
Is that commanders and leaders? Is that on the right hand side? Is it? Go up a little bit.
Anyway, yeah.
John Dello, Peter
Nah, their commanders and leaders. This guy was one of the hostages. Don't worry about it. I'm pretty sure it's Trevor Locke.
And then he was taken hostage. Then was he?
So basically, what happened was he was on duty, and
There it is. Yeah, Trevor Locke.
Yeah. So the lady, like, I don't know, someone on the reception went like, oh, Trevor, do you want a cup of coffee? I'm like, oh yeah, going in having a cup of coffee, and then like, bang, the door goes in, and they've got these terrorists with AK-47s. And he tells the story. The guy pointed the AK-47 and pulled the trigger because he obviously wasn't skilled in using an AK-47. It shot up and went in an arc around his head, missed him completely, like that.
Jeez.
And then he was taken hostage with the others. And
Fucking
then it went on for 6 days. They killed a hostage, which was the moment then that Margaret Thatcher, at the time, handed over primacy to the military,
Yes.
so it was signed off. And of course, at that time, because I remember watching it live on TV, and no one really heard about the SAS up until that point, and it was obviously that like raised their profile massively, and people started knowing about them. But they shot one hostage dead, and then they were doing all sorts of things. They were like, trying to they drilled. They were in the neighbouring building. They were drilling holes and putting optics in, and getting plans of like of the building and working out their assaults. And they pulled off an amazing raid.
You know what? I don't know if you read that long enough, or anyone who knows about it, but one of the terrorists, when they were all getting freed, one of the terrorists pretended to be one of the guys coming out, and it was one of the SAS soldiers. Obviously, they must have looked at who they were and noticed them, and thankfully grabbed them. But
really?
like, imagine to have the fucking balls to fucking 1 minute you hold an AK-47 and then pretend you're one of the victims walking out. And thankfully, one of the soldiers said, "It's fucking."
And because again, funnily enough, because I was just happened to be sitting there last night eating my cornflakes, watching one of the guys they're speaking to is Robert Horsfall, who is one of the team who went in, and they were like saying how like they just like all the hostages, they were just lobbing them all out, plastic cuffing everybody as well out on the back lawn. But incredible.
When they do come out, those hostages, they treat everyone the same, don't they? As if like they're all sus.
It was an amazing way they brought that to a conclusion.
Yeah.
Because no doubt everybody would have died.
Yeah.
Everybody would have died.
But you do forget, obviously this is just Wikipedia here, but like, how many things has been across the world?
Are they hostage situations?
I think, obviously, I'm sure there's loads, like cartel members taking, but
it's every day.
Yeah, but I think this is just
isn't it?
Well, I went to Medellin, and it was the murder capital of the world, wasn't it, for a long time?
Yeah.
And I went there, and it's an amazing city.
Really?
Yeah, it's so never seen one bit of danger. But they were saying, this idea of Pablo Escobar being this saint, they all hate him there, and they were saying how bad it was.
Yeah, so
people getting hostage every single day.
Yeah.
But now obviously it's nowhere near as bad now.
Yeah.
I think even like even the Orlando nightclub shootings on there.
Yeah. Now 3 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then obviously, even the Paris.
There's got to be more
Paris
than that.
attacks. Yeah, the Bataclan. They're on there.
And there's I can't remember the name. There's that one in Moscow where they not Moscow. I can't remember where it was in Russia where they what's it called now? Anyway, it was a primary school or a school they went into.
Yes, it was about 13 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah. And they basically they launched an assault which was a bit messy. The Russian special forces.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nalchik? No.
And no, it began with a B.
Moscow Theatre hostage crisis? No.
No.
Jesus,
there's a lot on there. I mean, it looks like you'll always be in work anyway. look at the positives.
I think South America would probably be a place to.
Yeah. Mate, it's been fascinating chatting to you, mate. How long have you been going for, Tom?
2 hours 40 minutes.
No way.
Nearly 3 hours.
This is our longest one by
You
far.
are joking.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's incredible. And there's so much more I still could say.
No, mate, can't thank you enough,
but
mate. It's been awesome.
No, it's been. I can't thank you guys enough because it's obviously wonderful to meet you, Tom, in person.
Yeah, likewise, mate. Yeah, honestly, it really is.
You, Andy, as well. And you know, you both got your own stories as well. And you know, I massively respect the fact that you value me enough to invite me here to do this. And I just hope whoever's listened to it enjoys it. You know, or get something from it, even, you know.
I think, yeah, mate. I mean, well, already just on social media the last couple of hours before we met, it's by far the most questions we've got.
Yeah, brilliant.
So people are obviously interested and knowing now, having heard you speak for a few hours, it's understandably so. It's going to be a
Yeah,
cracker.
100%. And also, we need to. You do need to write this book because you have
Yeah.
said it for about a year. And last time I spoke, a year and 2 months.
Yeah, at least.
Well,
'Cause
that's,
I re- honestly-
a name drop, but mine got nominated for Sports Book of the Year.
Oh,
So you know,
awesome.
so I've got a very good ghostwriter. So
Brilliant.
we're definitely
Because that guy you mentioned here, Chris Voss,
Chris Voss, yeah.
clearly he's made a business out of it. But
Yeah,
I think you know, you could even do like whether it's negotiation in the workplace and whatever that might look like. But
Yeah.
and then also, you know, there's so many strands and different routes.
There's a
you could
guy,
go.
isn't there, who's done. I read the book. So this is gonna make me sound like such a creep, but I've not always been this good looking, Steve. You know what I mean? There was a time when I did struggle with the ladies, and I bought this book called The Game,
Right.
and it's basically this guy who he reckons he can like just pull any woman,
Yeah.
you know, and it's all about, you know, communication methods and things like that. And so he come up with one called the Peacock. That's that middle one.
Neil Strauss.
Neil Strauss, The Game, undercover in the secret society of pickup artists.
That's brilliant.
So basically, you know what?
I can see where this is going.
Joking aside, it's actually a really good book.
Can see where you're going.
I read it when I was about 17, 18.
Brilliant.
And he talks about, like, joking aside, he talks about things that work. So for anyone who's looking to pick up women at the weekend, pin your ears back. So no, we do things called the Peacock theory.
Yeah.
So, you know, you wear a watch on both hands.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And you know, straight away it's something a bit different.
Yeah.
He'd talk about things like, so if you're ever walking into a pub and you're the first one in, you know, or a club, whatever it may be, or it could be a room. You know, you open the door, and you know when the door opens in the room, everyone looks towards the door, don't they?
Yeah.
So you then take a second and give that pause.
Yeah.
So everyone's on you then immediately.
Yeah.
And then you walk in with a big smile on your face, like you're loving life.
Yeah.
So straight away you're capturing the room's attention just by walking through the door. You know, it gives you little tips like that.
Yeah.
And he talks about, you know, if you're going over to a group of girls, and there's one that you particularly fancy, you know, you don't kind of target her first. You know, you speak to all the other friends first, and then the conversation should be something that everyone's got a different opinion on.
Yeah.
So there could be a group of girls, and if it's completely obvious that you're trying to hit on one of them and they're having a girls' night out, most of
It
the
ain't
time,
gonna work.
they'll just shut you down.
Yeah.
So you do something and you say like, "Hey girls, not going to bother your night out." So immediately you state a time that you're not going to be there long.
Yeah.
So straight away they've got that feeling of, oh, he's going to be here for ages.
Yeah.
Straight away you say, "Girls, 2 minutes," and then I'm out your ear.
Yeah.
You just need to settle an argument.
Yeah.
So open them with something like that straight away. That is, and then you say something that'll cause a bit of a debate. So you could say one that I used to use as a young.
Did you actually do this?
Oh, I used it all the time. Yeah, I hadn't any much success with these little things. So yeah, one thing I used to say was, you go, "Girls, dead quick opinion. Need to settle an argument. Would you be bothered by this?" So I've got a friend over there. He's split up with his ex-girl. He's got an ex-girlfriend, but they're still really good friends. But believe me, look, nothing's going to happen with them. They're just really good friends now, but completely not together no more, and nor will they ever will be. But he's got this new girlfriend now, and this new girlfriend's got a real problem with his ex-girlfriend. Now, listen, they're just mates. Nothing's going to happen, and I guarantee you'll get half the girls will go, "Oh no, I wouldn't want that," and half of them would say, "Well, if they're just mates now, then." So straight away you start this conversation, this debate, and then now you're part of the debate, and then it's, you know, you start.
I like it. It's very good.
So it's just, but it's like we said, just communication techniques,
isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? It's that's why I was so excited to speak to you, just because it's something that, although you do for a living, it's something we all do every single day.
Absolutely.
Without even knowing sometimes,
exactly. Always negotiating, and I like this. This is giving me some ideas now.
There you go. So you should maybe have your own pickup book. How to pick up chicks.
That's right, yeah.
But I was saying into the car, saying when we were driving here before, that honestly, I'm saying this because I'm putting it on record now for you. But I really, really do think that it would be such an interesting book, and just gauging from what people have said and how much reaction Andy's got on social media from people. I really do think. Yeah. I know you work like an absolute horse, and if you can find the time. Yeah.
Would you want to write it yourself? Would you, or
do you know? I don't know. I mean, I've always thought I'd like to write it myself, but then a while ago I tried to put pen to paper, but it's like, how do you where do you go with it? What's so when Tom was talking about a ghostwriter, then I thought maybe that's definitely something worth looking at, because although it'd be nice to write it yourself, the reality is, if you're putting your hands in somebody who can listen to your story and then actually craft it and articulate it.
He's one of my best mates now, a guy called Phil Reed, and he's on my book, which I've got for you, a little present for you.
Oh, that's brilliant.
But we just used to go for a beer, have a couple of beers, and I'd just pour my heart out to him, and he'd obviously have his the way he wants the book to go and stuff. And it was such a therapeutic kind of process. And he'd go away and he'd come back and say, "What do you think of this?" And then I'd say, "Oh, it was a Monday when that happened, or it was sunny, not night time, and his name was John and not James." And go back and forth a few times, and then before you know it, you've got a chapter, then 2 chapters, 3 chapters, and it was an amazing experience to go through.
I'm sure.
And I think ghostwriting, I think for someone who's busy all the time like yourself,
absolutely,
and you've proven now, but you can articulate stories so well. Yeah. And Phil's a great writer, I think.
Wow, okay, yeah. Sounds like a plan, definitely.
I'll put you in touch. Hopefully you can.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
No, thank you, Steve. Is there anything you want to things you want to anything you want to plug, or there's no book to plug?
No, my book. Saving souls, from saving souls to saving ass. No, it's just. I just want to say it's an absolute privilege to be with you both again. Well, for the first time, and then Tom, obviously.
Yeah, thank you, mate. Yeah.
I'm a great believer in all things happening for a reason, and in terms of you're meant to meet certain people at certain times for all sorts of different reasons. And I think sometimes when you offered me this, and I was thinking, I'm really busy, and I remember you came down to London, and I was trying to meet up with you guys then.
Yeah.
And then I thought, do you know what? I've got this window of opportunity, and I thought, just go and
Well, we've been worthwhile for it, then, mate.
And the other thing that brought my helped my decision making. It wasn't a hard decision making, but the 12th of June is my mum's birthday, and she passed away in 2001, so she would have been about 93 today. So it's a significant date, and she actually passed away on her birthday back in 2001 this day. So it's a significant day for me, and this is a significant event. So
Oh man, it means a lot, mate.
No, thank you so
much.
Yeah, and thanks for spending 2 hours on the train as well, and being at work at 4:30 last night,
and 4:30 tomorrow morning.
And so you get back in London at 10:30 tonight, don't you?
About 10:30 then.
And you're back in work
go
at
to the confidential.
Then he's back to being James Bond.
Yeah, get tooled up, get my car.
Oh mate, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Cheers.